Good evening. Seeing as it's 7:30, I'd like to call this January 24th, 2019 meeting of the Finance Committee to order. Tonight's meeting will be broadcast by Chelmsford Telemedia and recorded for future viewing. If anyone else in the audience is recording, please let us know now. Seeing none, tonight we're going to follow the published and posted agenda, and the first item on the agenda is approval of minutes. Do we have minutes that have been circulated?
Yes, the one from October before the town meeting.
Oh, geez, okay.
Yeah, I dug them out. It's from the 15th of October. I think this was before the before the town meeting, yeah.
For the town meeting.
I went so far as to find them. I did not get so far as to read them.
Well, I didn't even look for them, so you're ahead of me.
I wasn't there, so I don't think we can even take a vote.
Yeah, you can't. Well, no, if one of us doesn't vote, then we can't.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So I'm probably not going to, so let's just kick it over the next meeting.
Sounds good.
Yeah. All right, up next is a presentation on and/or discussion of warrant Article 1, the zoning bylaw amendment, version 1, proposed by the planning board for the special town meeting. Yeah, Paul, if you don't mind,
Try to assist you.
that'd be great.
The planning board met last evening, and they unanimously recommended to support the article that appears on the warrant under their signature. And basically, what's going on here, and this really was the primary reason for having the special town meeting at this time in early February, was because it's a new permit year having to do with chickens and small animals and so forth. And so what you have is you have the existing bylaw, and then what the planning board has submitted here is basically to remove the provisions of small animal regulations from the zoning bylaw. And so that's what their article represents there, which is why you see the stricken language. And then the underlying language is basically cleaning up the language that's there for the larger animals such as cattle and horses and so forth. Now, to make clear, to you and those watching, removing the provisions for the small animals from the zoning bylaw does not mean that small animals will not be regulated in Chelmsford. What sort of has been the concern right now is you have two elected boards that have jurisdiction over small animals. Under the zoning bylaw, which the planning board, monitors, endorses, develops a master plan, and is enforced by the zoning enforcement officer, who is our building commissioner. They have these regulations, and then meanwhile, these bylaws, which are, approved by town meeting and modified by 2/3 vote. And then you also have the Board of Health, under their state law provisions of health regulations, have their regulations regarding chicken care. And so when the issue came up that permits were improperly issued by the Board of Health because they didn't comply with the zoning bylaw, it created a concern, and then there were health concerns with rodents because of issues that have appeared in Chelmsford and across the Commonwealth with rodents during the last 6 months. And so what happened is we worked with Town Council Paul Haverty to look at, well, how do other towns manage small animals? And, and obviously this is not a unique situation in Chelmsford. And what was largely found is it's really a health issue. And so many communities only have the small animal regulated by Board of Health regulations and do not have the concurrent jurisdiction. And so that's the avenue that the planning board has taken with this article, which would basically strike those provisions, and therefore the regulations for the keeping of small animals would stay with the entirely now with the Board of Health. Now, what that does not mean, however, is that if there are structures that would remain in the zoning bylaw, much like accessory sheds and outbuildings, that's obviously not under this provision of the bylaw, and those provisions would stay. So if one were to build a coop or a shed or what have you, you'd be subject to those setbacks as per any other structure in a property. However, what's going on here are the regulations regarding lot size would be removed and setbacks. Now, again, those provisions are, because the Board of Health, as you may be aware, starting in December and then coming into this month, had a series of public hearings where they modified, and we believe, hopefully they've completed their revisions to their bylaw that have to do with setbacks from lot size and water bodies and so forth. So that's what's taking place under this article. And then, as you know, you have a petition article, which you may hear from after this, which goes the other end of the spectrum, which would basically retain the zoning provisions in place and in fact enhance them with the setback from water bodies. So at the end of the day, what town meeting is going to decide is three options. One is removal, which is this article. Second one is do nothing, we leave what's in place as is, and then the third one would be, before them for consideration, would be the petitioned article, which petitioner can speak to. So I just want you to understand what's taking place here under this article. And again, the planning board held a legally noticed public hearing last evening, took comments for almost an hour, and at the end of that hearing, voted unanimously to endorse its Article 1. So if you have any questions, I can be glad to answer them.
There's also a member of the planning board. that's sitting
Is
there.
somebody come in? Oh,
Yep.
great, good. Oh, hi, go on, get in. Yeah, I don't want to steal your thunder.
You don't want to steal
You certainly spoke it eloquently
Certainly.
last evening, so
Oh, well,
I'm sure you were coming.
I don't think I.
Nancy, if you can introduce yourself, please.
Nancy Arroway, 65 Littleton Road, Planning Board member.
Thank you.
So, as Paul said, the Planning Board did endorse this article. We heard from a lot of citizens. We felt that we really don't want different regulations to be in conflict with each other, and we currently have that situation. We also noted that the basic concerns over detrimental effects of small animals are addressed in other places in the zoning bylaws. So taking this out does not eliminate controls from the standpoint of the building commissioner being able to address nuisance situations. I will note, because I think it's relevant to this board, that we did have one speaker that spoke of financial impacts. The owner of the local agway presented and stated that while she has habitually been running chicken owner classes several times a year and normally has about 50 people participate, this time when she ran it about a week ago, she had 5 people participate and only 1 were from Chelmsford. She stated that her small animal feed sales has reduced dramatically since the new regulations are in place, and she's questioning whether she'll be able to remain in town.
And she emailed the board, and she's actually here this evening as well, so.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see
No,
that.
that's okay.
But that is of massive impact
No,
in a community that typically prides itself for its agricultural heritage.
Where else in the zoning law does it, you said it addressed where?
There are bits and pieces all through the zoning bylaws that address everything from setback of accessory buildings to noise control, odor control. I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't bring the sheet of references, specific references with me. I did read through them last night. But, I mean, the basic problems are addressed generically as opposed to specifically targeting a single source.
yeah. So Nancy, I did view your hearing last night, and I went through the currently posted version of the health Board of Health regulations, and I know the stated reason for why this article is being brought now and not in the spring is to make sure we don't have conflicting information on the books. But I'm looking at the setback information in the zoning article, and that hasn't been adjusted. It's still listed here as 50 feet from the abutting property lines, whereas in section 201-4 of Part 2, paragraph 11 of the health regulations, it says 25 feet from side abutting, 30 feet from any rear abutting, 40 feet from the front line.
I think that you'll find the difference is that the zoning bylaws address structures and the health regulations address runs,
Okay.
Excuse
So I
me.
address what?
chicken runs. At fences.
Well, they say hen
Which-
houses too.
yeah.
In their regulation. So they said hen houses and runs. And so I don't know if the zoning board wants, I'm sorry, the planning board wants to reach out to them and address that incongruity.
So what we
because-
voted on last night was to remove all references to small animal.
Okay,
We did not vote on the second article. We have not had a public hearing on it yet. And that will happen next week.
Okay, so with this change then, with all references to small animal being removed from Article 1, the 50-foot setback would no longer apply to them. It would be whatever is provided in the health regulation.
That's right.
Okay.
So this also gets stricken out?
No, it's such animals, because that's the stricken language is
Okay.
listed there. So all references to small animals have been removed entirely from this particular version. And it goes from being a 50-foot setback currently to a 25-foot side setback, a 30-foot rear setback, and 40-foot front line setback, subject to a 50-foot wetland restriction.
Jim, is that the Board of Health?
Yes.
So, like,
So what's effectively happening here is the 40,000, all references to small animals is taken out. So the 40,000 square foot and the 50-foot setback that apply to it currently, which would be in conflict with the current regulations that have been going back and forth, and the permits that were issued improperly, have been removed entirely through this version of Article 1, this version in Article 1. And in the health regulations, which now supersede or speak to.
right, that's what I wanted, like a summary of what the health regulations.
Yeah, so they're 13 pages long.
Oh, I guess I'm getting it.
They're large.
They're pretty inclusive. We can get into the nitty-gritty when we vote, because I want to bring a couple of things then, too. I know there was concern about pre-existing permits and non-conforming issues, which I think are potentially adequately addressed by the way that it's written. But that's for discussion prior to recommendation. But okay, I see what you're saying now, Nancy. That just altogether, there's no longer any small animal references.
There are no references to lot sizes or setbacks or density remaining with Article 1.
And the 50-foot remains solely for the cattle, horses, sheep,
That's right.
hogs, goats. Okay.
Large
Yeah.
animals.
And most communities do have the Board of Health being the decision maker on these.
It's all over the board. Most communities do not have a 13-page regulation on small animals,
Really?
really.
I'm shocked.
So so we had the conflict between the zoning laws and the health regs laws, whatever we're calling them. Was this a joint discussion and you guys decided to change yours as opposed to the health side changing? Or you just did this proactively without consideration for what they might do?
It was kind of started out in August, didn't it? This is going to come before.
This started, all right. The planning board was requested by the Board of Health to reduce the size limits
Yep.
for small animals for fall town meeting. They gave us specific verbiage, sizes, that basically took the 40,000 to 20,000. We took a look at it and said, it's not the size of the lot, it's the size of the setback. And we rewrote it around density based on setbacks, not on lot size. In the meantime, we had the rat issues. And how would I say this nicely?
Oh, just go ahead.
The Board of Health took on the responsibility to address the fears of the community that was having rat problems by developing a regulation that was drafted based on, it appears, everything that could be pulled out of every town in the surrounding area, conglomerated.
So it was longer than this?
What? Yeah, we got some of it out.
Okay.
It was absolutely reactive to a community's concerns. Because of the pushback from that particular community against the reduction in size, the Board of Health requested that we pull the article from fall town meeting that would have reduced the sizes.
We actually voted on that
And we
prior to it being
Yeah.
pulled because we had to get our book out. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and we did pull it at the last minute from town meeting. So that's,
Yeah, that's how
that's
the history. Any other questions?
And I think you heard my response to the
I'm
whole
just
thing.
not understanding. If my neighbor has chicken, how close can they build to my property line? Their coop or whatever
If Article 1 passes, that would be controlled entirely, well, no, not entirely. That would be predominantly controlled by the Board of Health regulations, keeping in mind that if their chicken coop is a building as opposed to a mobile cart, which some people use for chicken coops, but if it's a stationary building, it falls under accessory structures to residential properties and is still controlled by the setback rules for accessory structures. For substantial accessory structures, that is addressed by the dimensional tables in the zoning bylaws. For small accessory structures, sheds, the size of a shed, there are some size reductions to those setbacks. They are not permitted in front yards.
But if it's mobile, then what?
If it's mobile, it's no different than your garden cart.
You move it around.
You move it
Oh,
around.
I'm not 25 feet? Well, guess what? I'm moving over 5 feet.
And then that's where,
So I think to address that, David, it goes back to this section 11 in the Board of Health regulations now, and they provide that all hen houses and runs are going to be located not less than 25 feet from any side abutting property line, not less than 30 feet from any rear abutting property line, not less than 40 feet from the front line, and they shall not be situated in the front or side yards of the premises. And reasonable efforts are to be made to screen the hen house that runs from street view. Now, it also provides under paragraph 8, that in an instance of conflict between these regulations and zoning bylaw, the more restrictive shall control. Which means, for accessory dwellings, if the restriction would apply further through the zoning bylaw, through accessory dwellings, then paragraph 11 language would not apply. It would be the zoning bylaw that would apply to determine where that can be placed, and vice versa.
Thank you.
With the more restrictive being the current 50 feet from the lot lines, then you gotta be 40,000 square feet of a lot.
Currently, if it's not changed.
If it doesn't change, yeah.
I'm sorry, what do you, a run, what is that?
What's a run? A fenced-in
A
area.
fenced-in area, you call it a run, okay. Wasn't sure it was a dog run, just wanted to make sure it was
What?
fenced in, okay, thank you.
No.
Yeah, I mean,
And
dog runs are permitted up to the border of your property, but
You don't typically leash a
Good
chicken.
runs.
Whoa, you
Yeah.
know what, I've been,
Well, I guess you could.
nothing has surprised me.
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, any other questions?
And this bylaw has already, this is already.
Well, it's not a bylaw,
I mean,
it's
this
a
is-
regulation.
This is
Bylaw.
regulation, this has already been,
It's on our website, town
Board of
website.
Health regulations do not require town meeting approval. They simply require the 3 members of the Board of Health to vote on them.
Yep. Mass General Laws 111, Chapter 111.
and the fines for something like this and versus a zoning violation?
I think they're
The fines
pretty
are
similar.
yeah, they're first violation,
Substantial.
the fine shall be $50 the first violation, $100 the second violation, $150 the third violation, any subsequent violation, and each day of noncompliance will constitute a separate and new offense.
And what about zoning fines for violations? Is that,
I don't have them in front of me right now.
No, but I mean, is
Yeah, I
that
don't have
similar
it
to
in front of
that
me.
or same?
Off the top of my head, I think it's up to 300 a day, but don't quote me on it.
So, let me just kind of walk through the scenario. I am a neighbor who does not have chicken, but my, person next door does. I feel that they're not complying with what the Board of Health says. So my recourse as a citizen and a neighbor is to call the Board of Health,
Absolutely.
and then the Board of Health sends out an inspector or calls or checks out the
They
situation,
have inspectors.
and,
Two now.
Yep.
Yeah,
We
that's
vo-
right.
We voted on that, remember?
Yeah, because they're going to need a lot more
So then
inspections
they,
for chickens,
they
except
inspect
nobody
the
really can get a
situation,
permit, so.
and the person is advised to adhere to their regulations, is basically it, or pay the fines.
That would be the recourse, yeah.
And do the Board of Health
And
have the
they
authority
may
to
call,
tell
they may
people?
call in the animal control officer to have the animals removed.
Does the Board of Health have the power to make someone get rid of their chickens?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
they do.
Has the town forced anybody to get rid of their chickens so far?
Oh, my, yes.
Okay,
That's why there's such an
Part of the reason why
uproar.
this is
And
happening.
that,
okay. I was wondering how many. Is there any, give me a magnitude of, I mean, you don't have to count the chickens. I mean, just
Right.
how many instances of,
Quite a few,
quite a few,
I'll
okay.
pass it.
quite a few.
All right.
There are a lot of families that are very unhappy with this whole thing.
Now, let me ask another question, so that we know that there was a disparity between people who had gotten permits, that their property fell outside of the old regulation, but they had permits, and then we found out there are people that don't have permits. What's happening to go through and check that anyone who has a chicken,
I can't speak for Board of Health
So,
regulations
how are they
and
following
activities.
up to find out
so
if
the way
people?
it's set up in the Board of Health regulations is, there's a whole section on non-conforming pre-existing permits. And they have to meet three tenets. That's to be unnecessary hardship. The applicant had been issued a permit in 2018, and it was issued in error, and no change in owners of or the size or configuration of the applicant's lot since the granting of the permit. Also, it states that the only reason that they can be issued a existing non-conforming permit was for a denied permit solely by the reason of the size of the applicant's lot. So if it's a side yard, if it's a setback issue, that doesn't meet the new regulations on the Board of Health, rather than the 50 feet under the zoning bylaw, again, if this version goes through, then they still won't qualify for a non-conforming pre-existing permit under these regulations. It's only if they were denied it based solely upon the 40,000 square feet.
so Kathy's question, that was a future state. If Article 1 passes and I have a complaint, I would go to the Board of Health. Currently, I can have
If it
a-
doesn't pass and you have a complaint, you still go to the Board of Health.
Even if I'm within the Board of Health reg, but I'm not within the zoning
Yep.
requirements?
If it fails to be within the zoning requirements, you're going to have a very hard time getting a permit at this point. The only properties I think that would be given a permit would be properties that were given a permit last year that were undersized.
And
And they would have to meet all the other regulations within the Board of Health, new Board of Health regulations.
not only that, Eric, but paragraph 8 applies, in which it states that in instance of conflict between these regulations and a zoning bylaw, the more restrictive shall control. So even that, you'd still go to the Board of Health and you'd say, well, you're meeting all of these, but you're not meeting the current version of the zoning bylaw, and therefore they'd be able to enforce because they have that tenant within their regulations.
So I would go to the Board of Health, but they would be enforcing a zoning bylaw.
They're enforcing a zoning bylaw that takes precedence over.
Okay, got it, thank you.
I think an interesting question, a question of interest for you may be, how many people have been able to obtain permits under the new regulations?
Do you know that answer?
I do not.
Okay.
Paul might, I don't.
Under, what you mean, under the new board, what the Board of Health has proposed?
These are not proposed, these are in place.
Oh, the board
They were
currently voted on.
Only if someone, I mean, at the end of the day, right, if you want to have chickens and you don't conform, if you keep them, you keep your yard nice and clean and you keep your neighbors happy, no one complains.
If you scofflaw, then you're okay as long as you scofflaw well.
Well, you know what?
Is what
At
you're
the-
saying.
At the end of the day,
Only if you get caught is it a problem.
you know, at the end of the day, you know, if everybody's happy, the neighborhood's
That's
happy.
the way it worked before, yes.
That's
No
how
one
it worked
complains,
before.
everybody's happy,
That's
right?
not how it works now.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
But to your
That's why we've had the drop in business.
But to your your interesting question of what might have changed or how many permits have been issued since the new regs. Well, the zoning bylaw hasn't changed, so no matter what the Board of Health does, don't I still have to comply with the 40,000 square foot?
Currently, yes.
Currently, you do, yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Changed it.
yeah.
It'll open, I guess my interesting question would be, I'm not sure if it's interesting or not.
The point is that properties with 40,000 square feet cannot comply with this.
But so I guess my question is, the way this is written under the Board of Health regulations, they would have already had to apply for their permits for 2018, and therefore, if they're not in compliance with the current zoning bylaw regulation, can they get a permit because they are currently not in compliance and they've passed the period? Has anyone been granted extensions while this is pending? Do you know?
They have held in abeyance all applications.
They have.
2019 until the.
Until this time, okay, perfect. Thank you, Paul.
That's why we have.
And that's why you're having this now.
Meeting now, instead of waiting until April.
Good. I'm very glad when we're having special town meetings for a reason.
How much do we earn in chicken fees every year? I mean,
Oh, you don't have that off the top of your head?
nominal.
How much do we earn in chicken fines per year, I guess, is the question.
How much do we expect to earn in chicken fines a year?
I have no idea, but,
I think that's the goal.
Don't think it's germane to this, but, you know, Carl Sandburg wrote a nice poem that might sum this up. Good fences make good neighbors.
I would think.
Seems to me that would solve the whole problem.
That's not quite the problem.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Nancy.
You're welcome.
And thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
All right. Next on our agenda is discussion, I guess, not presentation of warrant Article 2, which is the second version of the bylaw. I did reach out by email a few days ago to the proponent of the article. I don't see him here this evening, although he was at the planning board meeting last evening. I did see him speak regarding it. If just looking at the warrant Article 2, it kind of parrots a little bit what's in the Board of Health regulation, but adds some additional restrictions. It goes kind of much further in effect. It keeps the small, I guess the thesis is it keeps the smaller animals in the zoning article as opposed to taking it completely out of the zoning article. What it does do is it decreases to 6 smaller animals from the 10 that's currently listed. However, there are none listed in the zoning law now, and there are 6 listed in the Board of Health regulations, kind of matches that. It ups the lot line setbacks to 75 feet from the current 50, or even less under the regulations of 25, and then 150 from surface to body water, which is 100 more than is currently in place. It adds roosters into the mix and says that they can't be kept except for farm by local, state, or federal law. But it adds additional language regarding structures of small animals weighing less than 25 pounds. It makes clear they're not to be situated on the front or side yards of the premises. So it kind of incorporates the language from the Board of Health regulations, but increases the setback requirements and keeps small animals in the zoning bylaw. It becomes more restrictive. And seeing as they're not here, I don't know, no one can answer really any questions about it. We can discuss this during the vote, I think. Warrant Article 3. Paul, as I understand it, there is no award from the arbitrator?
Yeah, as you may recall from Fall Town Meeting, we have one collective bargaining agreement that's outstanding for the 3-year period that will end this June 30th. That's with the police sergeants union, which is 7 sergeants in the police department, and also known as the Superior Officers Union. The arbitration case was heard prior to the holidays. The arbitrator's deadline was January 11th. The arbitrator requested a deadline to January 18th, and then last week requested an additional extension to no later than February 4th. I've spoken to our council today and asked that, if possible, it'd be helpful if they could have that decision issued next week, so that way I could get the information out to Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee, and such, and then perhaps ask you to meet the night of town meeting to render an opinion on that article. If this isn't done timely, then obviously it would wait till the spring town meeting. But our goal and why we sought this, again, there was a town meeting being called, and then once that's finalized, then we could then update the budget for the police department to reflect that, as, you know, to bring to town meeting in the spring. So that's where we're at. So again, we expect a decision within 7 to 10 days, hopefully within 7, so that we can get it to you.
Actually get it to the
and
town
get it
meeting.
to you. And obviously what happens is, when that comes in, we go to the accountant's office, we have her calculate the retroactive requirement, and then for what's needed for the town meeting. And if you recall, with the arbitration award under state law, the executive authority of the town, which is myself, Board of Selectmen, we have to present the article favorably to the community, and then the town meeting then decides whether to fund the article. And if it's funded, then the matter's resolved. If it's rejected, then it goes back to bargaining. So that's where it stands. So again, as soon as I get any information, which I again apologize, you'd hope we'd had it by now,
Not
we'll
in
get
your
it to
control.
you. And again, we're hoping and expecting it'll be along the lines of what we've already seen from the patrol union and the firefighters. So again, we'll get it to you as soon as it becomes available.
Thank you, Paul. Next, we have a presentation and/or discussion of warrant Article 4, a grant of access and utility easement. This is actually a Board of Selectmen article. I don't know, the chair of the Board of Selectmen is here this evening if he wants to speak to it. That's the way it's presented on the warrant article, at least.
Lundig's.
The gentleman that comes in.
Would you like
if
to
he
set up your
wants-
bill?
He can bring his chair up if he wants.
Bill is the one who is the proponent of this.
Bill, can you introduce yourself, please?
My name is William Harvey. I'm a member of SGC Development LLC, who's the owner of the parcel of land that's in question, that's located behind St. John's Church in North Chelmsford.
Okay.
Just to give you a brief history.
Sure.
This is a parcel of land that was owned by the church, so therefore the town was collecting no tax revenue whatsoever on the property.
No taxes in lieu?
No.
No payments in lieu, rather?
No. So the church decided, as they have in many districts, to put property up for sale that they weren't using, and it was purchased by Mr. Harvey. He's proposing to build on the site for 2 families, and has requested an easement across a piece of property that the town acquired some years ago, and is doing nothing with it. He would, perhaps, Bill, you can say what improvements you're going to make and how you're going to do it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Diggs. As I said, my name is William Harvey, SJC Development. I purchased the property some time ago. I purchased it in September 28th of 2017. So I didn't come to any rush or judgment exactly what I wanted to do. When I purchased the property from the church, I also purchased their engineering plans. So there was already a set of plans that was all engineered, ready to go before the planning board. And those engineering plans showed that the access to the land would be from John Street. And when I looked at John Street, as well as a lot of other developers, it's not a very good street to go down. It's only about 20 feet wide, but at the same time, there's small houses with very small properties, small driveways. So if you take in consideration the neighbors parking on the side of the road.
It was my paper route when I was younger.
Okay. I delivered papers too, it wasn't fun. And also, when I was out there at that time, they also had the soccer fields in activity, so you get all the soccer fields going, you get the kids running around, and also there was a neighbor at the end of the street that also told me there was, always problems when it comes to traffic on that street. So I took a look at Tobin Street, and I did some research on Lot T, and Lot T specifically states, it's dedicated for street purposes. That Lot T was deeded to the town by the developer of Lost Valley Drive in 1987 for $1. So that's how the town acquired it. And as you see on the plan that you have in front of you, it says dedicated for street purposes. So that Lot T is essentially, I'd say 70% of it is pavement, which directly abuts my land. So my idea was it would be much easier, safer, and better for the community to utilize access to the land from Tobin. And I come up with a list of reasons why it would be beneficial to the town. And of course, it would be beneficial to myself. The first one would be that there would be road improvements that would be made at the end of Tobin Avenue Extension, which is essentially the Lot T. My engineer has discussed the improvements that the DPW would like to see at the end of Lot T, and it's pretty much been approved by the DPW, the improvements that would be making. So one part of the improvement is called the swath, which is essentially a way for the fire trucks to go down the road safely and be able to turn around, and that would be at Lot T. At the end of my development, I also have a swath which would be suitable for the largest emergency vehicle in town. That was approved by the fire department. The road improvements at the end of Tobin Ave, I believe, would run between 10 and 15,000. I asked my engineer to reach out to Christine Papadopoulos, the town engineer, to give an estimate, but she's been very busy, so she wasn't been able to do that. She said she'd try and get it to me Monday night when I go back before the Board of Selectmen. Also, part of that would be, I'd be required to post a bond, and the bond would essentially guarantee that this work would be done. The second benefit to the town, and I had discussions with the North Chelmsford Water District, is the looping of a water line. So at the end of John Street, the water line is dead-ended, which essentially means it doesn't go anywhere. And as a result of that, there's usually water quality issues. Mr. Harper told me that sometimes they have to go out there and drain the fire hydrant 2 to 3 times a year. Also, what came to my attention is Tobin Avenue also is dead-ended. So what we essentially would do is to create a loop where the water would have constant flow. So there'd be a loop from John Street over to Tobin Avenue. Now, that right there is considerable amount of money to install a water line in that distance. But part of the agreement would be, it would be the developer's sole responsibility to put the water line in at its own costs, and essentially also the any supplies. My contractor gave me an estimated figure that would be around about $20,000 to $25,000 to do that. I just talked about number 3 would be safety. Safety, John Street is 20 feet wide. Tobin Avenue is a legal size road. It's 40 feet in width. I've been down there plenty of times. I haven't seen any young children playing out in the street and things like that, as opposed to John Street. Also, another issue that Chairman Diggs brought up at the meeting, which I think is important, is the issue of grinder pumps. So by going from John Street, and access from John Street, that's essentially where the sewer would be pumped up. So that would call for 8 grinder pumps. So if you have 4 condominiums, it's a total of 8 units. It would call for 8 grinder pumps.
It's a steep grade there, right? 30%.
It's a very high grade. So those grinder pumps would obviously have to be maintained by the town of Chelmsford. In addition, which I think is very important, is that there's 2 duplexes at the end of Tobin Avenue, which is 27-29 and 30 and 32 Tobin Avenue. Now, these condexes, which is in a condominium development, they were never connected to town sewer, so they're still on septic. Reasons why, I don't know, but we all know that everybody has to be connected to town sewer. As a benefit to the owners, I put on my plan that I'd run a sewer line to their property, right to the property line, which would essentially allow them to tie into my sewer line, the brand-new sewer line. That right there would save them a tremendous amount of money, because if they end up going down their own street, which is the private road, Lost Valley Drive, that whole road would essentially have to be taken up, and then they'd have to go all the way down to the end of Tobin, where the sewer line ends. So it's a considerable distance. By using the backyard, they can just run it that way, and you're just essentially digging up some land and then refilling it and seeding it. So that's something that I would do.
So can I ask a question? So I didn't really understand when you were saying the grinder pump. So you're saying if you come in through the Tobin Ave Lot T, then they wouldn't need the grinder pumps?
You don't need grinder pumps, no.
Okay, so that would avoid grinder
Yeah.
pumps.
Right.
Okay.
The top of Highland is a hill.
Oh, yeah.
And so where that John Street is located is basically the top of the hill. And Tobin is about, I don't know, 15 feet lower. So a gravity system wouldn't work out the back there into John. It would have to be grinder pumps.
So it would avoid grinder. Okay, thank you.
Also, I've reached out to the homeowners that directly abut my land. There's 4 homeowners. I have excess land. This is zoned RC, so I only need 20,000 square feet of land per condex. So I have plenty of excess land. So for privacy reasons for the abutters, also to extend their own yard, so they can continue dumping leaves or branches, which they've always done technically on my land. Now they'd have an extra, one person I can give 5,000 to, there's like another person I can give 7,500 to. So I've reached out to all 4 of them. One person, only replied to me, and he was very favorable to that. And also there's a neighbor at the end of John Street that would also benefit, because like I said, there's no reason that I have to be creating lots this size when I only need 20,000. So it would benefit the neighbors if they needed excess land. And lastly, well, not lastly, but also, when I do clear the land, all the abutters, I'm gonna keep all the trees and the vegetation, a good distance from the house so that they have privacy, whether or not they want land or they don't. So this development also, it'll be a for sale development. It's not gonna be a for rent. It's going to be condominium association. Condominiums that I usually create is I have very strict condominium rules. I'm just type A. When I build something, I like to build something really nice, and I hope that it stays like that in the future. So there'll be strict condominium association rules with regards to maintenance of the property. The buildings have to remain looking similar. And as we all know, the prices in Chelmsford are not too affordable. There's really not much new construction out there that you could say that's affordable. These condominiums would be affordable for a first-time home buyer, and they'd be brand new. So essentially, somebody could buy one of these condexes rather than an older house in town for pretty much the same price.
How many square feet?
The units?
Yeah.
The units will, I rebuilt these units before, so on Plum Street, I built them, and they were 30 feet in depth by 60 feet wide. That's 2 units. So these ones might be a little bit smaller.
So there'll be 2 buildings, and each of the 2 buildings would have 2 units in them. So four units, 2 buildings, two buildings that have two duplexes.
Just duplexes, yeah. It's just a
Wow,
condo.
That was good,
That was
Kathy.
a
I
lot
like
of
that.
complicated stuff to get that out.
I just brought a picture because I'm gonna be building the exact same ones. I built one on Plum Street, I built one on Grove Street that I'm finishing, and then I have another one I'm building on Grove Street. It's a beautiful floor plan, it's very spacious, and it looks a lot nicer than building a townhouse. So if you looked at finances, what's more financially beneficial to me, just talking about money, not talking about looks or anything like that, or the community, all day long, it would be building something like on Turnpike Road, or Riverneck, or whatever that one is over there. So that's what builders are building, just going back to the 80s, building something cheap, no foundation. So that's not what I'm doing here. So these will look like houses.
How many square feet per unit?
I guess about 1850,
Okay, 2 bedrooms?
3.
3?
Yeah.
Are there 4 units, 4 separate buildings, or 2 separate?
4 buildings, 8 units.
Yeah, 4 buildings, 8
Buildings, 8
units.
units.
4 buildings.
Yeah, 8 units.
Right, and going back to the grinder pumps, you know, if the individuals at the end of Tobin decide to tie into me, that's wonderful, because that rate there eliminates 4 more grinder pumps. So now you're up to the elimination of 12 grinder pumps. And lastly, you know, I'm throwing things out here that I think are definitely beneficial to the town. There's expenses that I'm gonna put out there, like I said, with regards to the elimination of grinder pumps. I don't know what the cost of the maintenance of those in the future. The water, like I said, would be about 25,000, road improvements would be 10 to 15, and, you know, the water line, sometimes between, about 25,000. So we're looking at those in figures. In addition, it was brought to my attention that there's some issues that have been arising at Varney Park. I lived in North Chelmsford for a long time. I used to go there, and what I've recently seen there, you know, I just think that there's a lot of money that was spent there, and unfortunately, it has to be, more money needs to be spent there again. So, part of this process, I'd be willing to donate, and this would be specifically for Varney Park, it has to be directed only to Varney Park, would be the sum of $30,000. The sum of $30,000 would be paid prior to the issuance of any building permits, okay? So, it's done. It wouldn't be,
That's consideration for the easement. the granting
as
easement,
well as
yeah.
all the other stuff.
Mhm.
So it wouldn't be, can you wait, you know, after the first unit, I'll give you 5,000, after the second, I'll
Mhm.
give you 5. Let's just get it out of the way. $30,000, that would have to be a condition prior to the issuance of any building permits.
Varney Park could use it.
And again, that's something I want specifically directed only to the park. I think I've touched on
I think you hit everything,
most of the
Bill.
bases.
Can I just ask you, how far, where is the soccer fields from here?
They're right there.
They're
Right
there,
here, right?
yeah.
Right here?
So,
I'm looking at this right here.
so if you're looking at this right here, that's John Street right here.
Yeah.
The
They come right-
cement parking lot is right there. And
Okay.
the Chelmsford
Right here.
Housing Authority building is right there, and the soccer field is right here, and there's a little
So
playground
this is this
area right
area
there.
right here. This is what he's, right
No,
here.
yeah, well,
This is where the soccer field is, that lot right there.
yes.
And this is what,
So the town-owned land is right here. That's the town-owned land for the soccer field and the Housing Authority. That's John Street, goes right through here. So John Street would be where you'd have to go if the easement's not granted.
yep.
Purley would be much more difficult. A Also technically a street.
No, this street is awful.
Yeah. Well, that's Highland. You're pointing at Highland.
Yeah.
I don't like going down Highland in the winter. The
Never gone up that high.
land right there, this area right here is what Bill purchased from the Archdiocese, up till this location. Now, it's unclear to me on a couple of documents, they still own the parking lot area of that portion of land, correct? They didn't sell that portion to you?
The church?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's all there's.
That's all there, okay.
there's.
So
It actually,
It goes right up to like the edge of it, or?
no, actually, the church owns like probably another 100 feet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So Tobin goes in through here. This section technically is not an accepted street. It's Hidden Valley right there. And that's where the two condominiums are, two unit condominiums. And right here, that square right there you see on there, that's the town-owned land.
Yeah, okay. Got it.
I'm sure that was instructive for everybody at home. Yeah. Any questions?
No, also, I'm sorry to interrupt, just quickly. Also, this was, the plan was approved before the planning board, so they
Okay.
reviewed all the engineering, the documentation, and obviously it's subject to
Of
the
course.
granting of an easement.
Yeah.
But the planning board closed the hearing, they voted on it, they voted unanimously, so that.
Did you have any neighborhood, either support or opposition that came to speak to it?
There was only one lady, and that had to do with Lost Valley Drive.
Okay.
And again, I just don't think that she understands the benefit of this easement. She saw an easement, and then she was more or less, the developer's forcing us to tie into a sewer, which I'm not doing.
You're not the authority to do that.
I don't have the
Yeah.
authority, and
Yeah.
I'm just laying it out there that if you ever want to do it, you can do it.
It's available.
Right.
Got it.
It should also be mentioned that Paul had the town attorney look at it,
Mm-hmm.
maybe Paul wants to address what the finding was.
Do you want to address it?
What's the question?
The town, you had the town attorney look at it?
Yes.
Town council?
Yes. Yeah, Town Council Paul Haverty has looked at this. He'll be meeting with the Board of Selectmen in closed session Monday evening to speak about this interest in property. So at this point, the board hasn't taken a position. Paul did provide counsel to the planning board on this matter. The issue with the subdivision is you need frontage.
No,
And that's
but,
why they're here for the easement to access the property. If they weren't seeking to go through Tobin Avenue, then as the applicant mentioned, they would go through John Street.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And so that, and Attorney Haverty made that point, to the planning board, is that, that there are other alternatives to access the property. And so the planning board in its actions was noted, was within its rights to grant the subdivision, which it did last evening. So that's, that.
And you would have the same issue whether you did the duplexes or a single-family home.
Yeah, you'd have the grinder pump issue because of the grade. A gravity
But even
system.
The issue is he doesn't have the legal right to get to Tobin Avenue without
yeah.
obtaining, without the
Correct.
easement.
Right, but he would need, like, if he
Right.
decided
So, yeah,
against two families and did single-family homes, you'd be still seeking the same thing, right?
yeah,
Yep.
my original plan, but I just didn't want to have to go through another round of boards, is of course, I still think this would be the best idea for the property, would be doing single-family houses. My idea was I wanted to do 8 affordable, single-family dwellings that would be about 1,450 square feet with a one-car garage. Reduce the land area to 10,000. So
Yeah,
it could
but
all
you
fit
need a lot of
and
variances for that.
And be spacious. But that would have to go before the Board of Appeals.
Mm-hmm.
And since the plan's are already done, I decided not to
Bedford
go
did something
further.
like that. There's a road in Bedford by the bike path that like kind of, have gone
We've heard-
ways, and they've done, those houses were beautiful.
Yeah.
We've heard the word affordable. These are not the certified affordable units in the town's inventory.
Well-
When he's using the word affordable, it's not the affordable unit that we speak
No,
of.
I know, and that's
Subsidized housing.
fine, but it's still something smaller than a McMansion that, quite frankly, kids coming out of college with big debt can't afford their first house, because that's all you get. So, having something that's mid-price range or even for someone who, with, like the ones in Bedford, I think were all same floor, right, smaller lots. So people who, getting older may want to look at a, floor plan with a smaller piece of land, so I don't have to take care of it. So-
You mentioned this would be an 8-unit condominium association, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I should say that the only feeling that some people have expressed is that the town was really getting nothing for this easement. And it seems that Mr. Harvey has alleviated those fears by offering to generously fund some improvements at Barney Field, which are certainly well needed.
Well, doesn't the town get taxes and more taxes as a consequence
And plus,
of
we
doing this?
get tax money, we get excess money from the vehicles that are parked there. We
Right.
get money from the people who move there and visit the restaurants in town, so.
You also have 8 three-bedroom units, so you're also gonna have associated expenses with,
Yeah.
most notably
Yeah.
school children.
That
Well,
becomes a cost-benefit analysis, but
Right,
yeah,
yeah.
We
I understand
can't
that.
have
What he's offering tonight, I guess it hasn't been discussed in the previously, is some consideration for the initial easement that's being granted. All right.
So is there any objection coming other than what we've just heard?
Well, the Board of Selectmen haven't discussed it yet. They haven't had the ability to discuss it yet. They'll be doing it on Monday night. We have to make our decision tonight because we're required to provide our recommendations to the town meeting 1 week prior.
1 week?
Yes,
But in the bottom line, we have to approve the easement. We have the power to approve the easement.
correct. It's town-owned land.
Town meeting has to authorize the select.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We have to,
The selectmen, right, town meeting authorizes select.
It's town-owned land. Town meeting authorizes selectmen have the ability to go forward with the authority, yeah. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You gonna vote on this tonight?
Yeah, we are. We're voting on everything. Well, everything that's available.
I'm horrible at finances.
All right, so that brings us to public comment prior to vote. If anyone would like to speak on any of the articles that have been presented to us tonight, they can do so now. I'd ask you, if you approach the mic, you state your name and your address. And there's no one. Okay, so we're going to go straight ahead to vote on recommendations for special town meeting warrant articles.
Would you like a,
I think we take, well,
before
yeah.
discussion, do you want
a vote, yeah, on motion, rather.
I would make a motion that we accept Article 1 as presented.
I second it.
Discussion.
I kind of feel like it's deja vu all over again.
A little bit, but now, what we didn't have last time were the regulations from the Board of Health. They weren't in place the way they are now. And this does create an issue where we have conflicting law on the books with regulations and zoning bylaw. The zoning bylaw makes it super restrictive, but it's what's currently in place. The, I guess, desire, based upon the vote last night from the planning board and discussions we had this evening, is that they make it slightly less restrictive. However, there are additional restrictions that are provided in the Board of Health regulations regarding this, and they've kind of turned this over as a health regulation rather than a zoning regulation, except for accessory dwellings and their setback requirements.
My perspective is that if someone has a complaint that they have, it seems that they have a recourse. They can report them to the Board of Health, have the Board of Health come out for inspections. So there seems to be a recourse if you have complaints, and,
They have that now, right?
yeah,
Before we do anything with this.
yeah, but it seems like there wouldn't be a duality in roles. It wouldn't be, I think it would be,
It becomes
Board of Health.
It becomes clearer who has enforcement.
right.
Yeah, but, so my only concern is when you think about, I don't know, animal stuff, someone's more likely to grab the zoning bylaw than think, oh, I need to look at the Board of Health regulations,
I
right?
guess, but the permit issuing authority is the Board of Health. So in order to get the permit to do what you have to do, you have to go to the Board of Health to get the permit, and they are gonna give you the regulations to do so. So if you go ahead willy-nilly and install something prior to going for the permit, that's on you. You haven't researched to see what the regulations and the zoning bylaws require.
Okay, so the permit is the Board of Health then?
Permit is Board of Health, yeah. They're the ones that issue the permit, and I feel it makes sense for them to have the control over the regulations, subject to more restrictive provisions in the zoning bylaws for the dwellings. I get why they're doing this. It makes sense to, rather than trying to rework the entire zoning thing and make it a match between the two, or even a more restrictive than the two, I think it makes more sense to put it into the Board of Health's hands. What we need to make sure is the Board of Health enforces properly, and that going forward, that they're sticking to the regulations, and they aren't issuing permits that are not conforming to the requirements and regulations, as we have this situation currently. And that kind of brings me to what I was talking about earlier when I said I was going to bring up during discussion. There's a whole section now on non-conforming pre-existing permits. I brought it up briefly earlier. It only applies to people that did not meet the requirements, were issued a permit currently, and they don't meet the requirements because of the applicant lot size. They're under 40,000 square feet. This does not apply to someone who was granted a permit or even did not have a permit, where there's a structure built in the side lot, or there's a structure that's not the proper setback under the new setback requirements provided by the Board of Health regulations. And that's the only departure from the zoning regulations. Currently in the zoning regulations, if we forego the discussion on the 40,000 square feet and say that's a moot discussion at this point, for purposes of this discussion.
Right.
The setback requirement is no longer going to, in the zoning bylaws for 50, 50, 50, 50 all the way around, is no longer going to apply to small animals, and instead, the Board of Health regulations will be the controlling regulations, and they're a little less restrictive than what's currently on the books for the zoning. They're as I mentioned earlier, paragraph 11, the 25 feet from the sidings, from the side, so it goes from 50 to 25 from the side lot setback. And then it's 30 feet from the rear abutting property line as opposed to 50. So it cuts 20 feet off from the back, 25 feet off from each side, and then it cuts 10 off from the front line. It still says you have to have it behind the property, behind the property. It cannot be situated in the front or side yards of the property.
Okay. So 25 feet, that's like, let's just say like 2 car lengths. A little more than 2 car
A
lengths.
little more, yeah.
Just to visualize.
Yep.
And it still has to be in the back,
Yeah, it has to be 50 feet from water.
It can't be
50 feet from water.
Yep, that stays.
And the only way it bounces back to the zoning if you've got a physical structure that remains stable. Isn't that what she was saying? Like, so say I built a physical structure. She said that those, like a shed, that physical structure still falls under the zoning laws?
Correct. So if it's more restrictive than the hen house paragraph in here,
Okay.
then the zoning bylaw under paragraph 8 of the health regulations applies. And therefore, the greater restriction will take precedence.
So it sounds to me like now people have a clearer path to register their complaints. There are restrictions, but the 40,000 square foot limitation has been eliminated, so more people would be qualified to have chickens, right? Because not everybody has an acre lot. So it sounds like more people could qualify, and people who have complaints have a methodology for acting on their complaints.
I come back.
Seems like it seems better.
I come back to people have an avenue for complaints today.
That's
They
true
do.
too, I mean,
So you're taking away the size of the lot, and you could potentially have chickens 2 car lengths from your property. No matter how big your lot is, or how small your lot is. I like the 40,000, or whatever number we'd like. To me, you should have to have a certain amount of size lot to have chickens. I don't like decreasing the limits from the sides of the property. At least not to look ahead, but at least the next article, it drops the square footage size, but lengthens the sides from the property you have to be, so. I don't think this, I think all this would do would increase the number of people that could have chickens. Doesn't change anything about enforcement or who they can appeal to or the permitting process, except it makes it more easy to have chickens.
Good argument. I tend to agree with Eric in the sense that it does make it easier to have chickens. And, you know,
But is that necessarily a bad thing?
well, if you're a property owner whose those chickens are next to, it could be a bad thing.
So they're still subject to noise ordinances, they're still subject to the cleanliness. If you, I mean, they're pretty extensive regulations on the Board of Health. They can be called on, there's requirements for where waste and feed are kept and located. It's, I mean, they're pretty, I would say, we're pretty thorough now. So it's not just, well, you can have it now, you gotta make sure that you're properly keeping them. The permits can be pulled.
Here's my personal, and I agree with Eric, is I've had a bad neighbor. I spent 10 years suing my bad neighbor because of zoning violations. Came to front of the town. And it is really, and all you need is, you know, one bad neighbor, right? And my parents had small animals on a property. My family are farmers. Chickens are very dirty. There are certain small animals that are not dirty. When you keep your land clean and your neighbor's happy, no one complains. But all you need is that one bad neighbor, and taking away, it's hard. It's hard, you know, I've seen the town not, you know, they do what they can. There's only so much resources. And it can be very stressing to a property owner. So I'm kinda, I don't see us needing to make it easier.
Yeah, you know, maybe I've got it wrong, but in the beginning, people weren't complaining to the town because they couldn't get permits for chickens. It all came about when there was some sort of a rat problem that got blamed on the chickens, which then launched this whole thing. I mean, I don't know that the existing regulations weren't fine.
Well, here's the problem, the Board of Health was issuing permits, and it was not adhering to the
Yeah.
zoning bylaws. And so, do we know how many,
There were about 10 that didn't comply. There were also found that there were people who did not have any permit who had chickens as well.
Sure.
That issue as well. So, and that was the other.
and the only complaints that came in were after that road over by Dalton, Beckman, thank you. That's when the issue came to a front. There had been no really complaints received at all prior to that. Okay. I mean, the regulations, as I'm reading them, they keep these setback requirements, although they are not, they are slightly less restrictive than they currently are. They set the number not to exceed 6, where it's currently 10 under the current bylaw for the zoning. It adjusts the setbacks. It takes 20 off the back. It takes 50 off the sides total and 10 off the front. But that still leaves you. I mean, the setbacks are for the house, the hen house itself, which must still be kept in the back yard. It can't be on the side yards or the front yards.
Chickens are not allowed to run free.
No,
right?
they're
Like, there's a-
and perceptible noise from the chickens in the premises boundary must conform to all existing bylaws. Odors from the chickens, chicken manure, or other chicken-related substances shall not be perceptible at the boundaries. Hen houses and runs shall be maintained in such a manner to prevent the spread of infectious or contagious diseases, and shall be kept in a clean and sanitary condition, free from decaying foods, filth, feces, vermin infestation, stagnant water. Hen houses and runs must be routinely cleaned pursuant to the written maintenance plan on file with the Board of Health, or more frequently as may be required to prevent odor and disease. I mean, these are pretty extensive and inclusive regulations that are to be enforced now that there has been an issue. Whether or not it was the cause of the rats, I'm not going to get into that. It's Pandora's box I wish to keep shut. But the fact of the matter remains is I understand why it's coming now. It's to help those few that received permits, believing that they had proper permits, and are now in violation because of an incorrect issuance of those permits by the Board of Health due to their incongruity with the zoning bylaw. Quite frankly, will it potentially increase the amount of chicken coops? Potentially. I don't know. I don't know how many people are going to be able to still meet these current setback requirements. It'll make it a little less restrictive, but there's still a lot of restrictions in here that would apply, that would prevent, and would also provide for recourse in the event that they're not currently being.
I have to admit that I'm indecisive in this matter because I feel that I might be a little old school, that I would prefer not to have chickens next door to me, but I realize that I realize now that people like to have chickens, and so I would like to make sure that as a homeowner, I have recourse if something that is not going right next door to me. I don't want my property affected by what's happening next door, so I'm quite torn by this. I mean, if.
Yeah, and it also says that no poultry shall be allowed to forage, stray, or roam unrestricted at the premises or elsewhere, and hens must at all times be confined to the coop, hen house, and run.
So when we talked about this prior to the fall town meeting, I made a note that the assessor said that there were about a fifth of residential lots in the town were an acre or more.
Right. I was surprised by
Roughly
that too.
20%.
Yeah, I thought there was more.
So I don't discount or argue that the list of new regs is extensive. At the end of the day, this increases the number of people that can have chickens.
Right.
It does. It does.
Not saying that it's willy-nilly with no rules and regs, but that's what this does. Doesn't change the recourse we currently have. It just makes it more open for those who are able to apply and meet the requirements and get a permit.
But I think unlike what we were presented with in the fall, we now have these regulations which were not on the books. They were far less extensive and far less inclusive, and they addressed some of the concerns that were brought up when we were discussing this back in the fall. In the fall, as recall, I think we all voted
No.
against
Yeah.
this change in the bylaw. And I find myself changing my mind based upon the new regulations we have in place. And I do think this is a Board of Health issue, not a zoning issue, up until you have the regulations as to what can be built for an accessory dwelling,
Well,
which is still in effect.
I know how you feel. A minor point, though, is that it could affect the value of your property as well. If you're trying to sell your property, someone buying that property might not want to see chickens next to theirs. It's a difficult issue.
Yeah, I'm all for making things, putting things so the bylaws match what we have and, cleaning up. But, we're not people are building on smaller and smaller lots in town. Like, this is not a farm community.
Yeah, well, to that argument, look at Cambridge and a lot of the surrounding communities, Brookline, Halston, Brighton. They're on even smaller lots and they have chicken coops.
I don't want to be like Cambridge, sorry.
Well, I don't believe me, Eric, if you know me, I don't either. However,
I'm just like,
I'm not sure we're just being.
And if those who have those, who issue those permits prior, can they apply for a variance? To get
I
it?
mean, they could, yeah,
So someone can, huh?
What would their hardship be?
but they'd have to prove a hardship.
No, they have to have a hardship. They can apply, but the question.
It's unlikely that they're going to be granted that variance.
Right.
Anyone can apply for a variance, but you have to have the ability to prove that you have that hardship that should be corrected.
And if no one complains, like none of your neighbors
Yeah,
complain?
the hardship usually in the zoning term, is the topography of the land, the shape,
Yeah, that you have a unique situation that cannot be addressed
Right, it's
through
not
the
just-
current zoning.
It's not just I like chickens and, not a big enough piece of land.
My hardship wouldn't be my lot isn't big enough. I don't comply, I'm not gonna.
And I
I'm
want
not-
No,
I
no,
want
it
to
does not.
grow
That is not a
go
hardship
over-
under the zoning.
I have a question, because I read in an article about the Board of Health was having people have their property surveyed, or?
They're not doing that anymore.
Certified plot plan is what they were asking.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's,
Very expensive.
Now they,
expensive,
okay,
but
so
that's
a
not
certified plot
happening.
plan is gonna be a couple $1,000s. They're now requiring a mortgage inspection plan or something of that nature, which is more like 150.
okay.
Yeah.
So, and that is for the purposes not of lot size, but just of where they're gonna locate their pen?
Well, both, actually, lot size and location. Currently, because of this current,
Because of the current thing.
this current law states you have to have 40,000 square feet.
So if this is,
It would only be for setbacks and location of the,
Okay.
yeah.
should we,
Animal to raise in the backyard than chickens, my personal.
Hmm?
No.
No, seriously, what?
No.
No, honestly.
No, I would just say like,
What
you
animal?
know,
It's all
like
small
small
animals,
animal. I know, I.
It's not just chickens,
I
it's
know,
rabbits,
that's why I'm
it's- yeah.
trying to be, like, people think chickens and they think one thing.
It's not just
You
chickens.
No,
think
that's
a
right.
different animal acts very different in the backyard, right? It's all small animals. You know, rabbits are small animals, a lot of people raise them for food, and they're a lot cleaner. Don't give me that face, I'm very good if you ever tried it.
I have, I don't like it.
I think we digress.
Why ever would you say that?
So it's not just chickens.
That's right.
But they are the tastiest.
No, they're not.
Over rabbit, yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I don't see any Kentucky Fried Rabbits around here. There's no Popeyes with rabbit meat.
So are we ready to vote? What do we think?
I don't know, have you exhausted this yet? I don't know.
I'm ready.
I'm ready to vote.
You ready?
No.
Is that a yes? You ready to vote?
Yes, I'm ready to
Oh,
vote.
okay, perfect.
I think
All right.
Rabbits are better tasting.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions?
I'm sorry, I'm completely
No, that's fine.
indecisive, so,
All right, the recommendation fails. A recommendation against 3 to 1 to 1 abstention. Article 2? Seeing as we've voted down Article 1.
I will make a motion that we accept Article 2 as presented.
I second the motion.
Discussion?
I think this, I'm gonna say no, because I think this is, this seems too strict. I don't know, I'm gonna be anti this.
I'm definitely against this one. I don't understand the additional footage that's been put in here. I understand the thought process behind trying to lay out what the requirements are in the zoning article. I'm not sure what the impetus was for changing it from 50 to 75 and 150. I appreciate putting roosters in there. I think they're already dealt with in other locations and by the general laws, so we're not gonna have roosters showing up on half-acre lots, regardless of whether or not it's in the zoning article. Yeah, I'm not quite sure the impetus behind the increased restrictions.
Having watched the hearing last night, it had to do with the bodies of water. The feeling was is that the rodents would travel along the body of water.
Yeah, I heard that discussion too, but
That was, I'm just offering that for the point
Yeah.
of information, that was the sense from the hearing.
But that doesn't explain the 75 feet on the side setbacks, yeah. So increase it from 50 to 75 and 150 for the water, which triples it, which is not in, doesn't follow what the Board of Health recommendations are, and I would tend to think that they would understand what their concerns are with the 50 feet rather than the 150 feet. Any other discussion? Are we ready to vote on this one?
Yep.
Yep.
All right. All those in favor? Opposed? 5-0 against recommendation for approval. So, based upon these recommendations, the determination is that we keep the 40,000 square feet and the 50-foot setbacks and keep the language regarding small animals in the bylaw. Article 3, we're postponing. We may or may not have an answer by the night of town meeting, special town meeting, Paul? Okay, so I think we'll have to set a meeting based upon that. We'll have to set it no later than Thursday of next week, I think. So stay tuned. Article 4. Do I have a motion?
I would make a motion that we accept Article 4 as presented.
I second it.
Discussion?
It seems that there are benefits to the community with the easement, and I would be in favor of this article.
I agree. My only, hesitation is I would prefer single-family homes versus condominiums or these townhouses. And, but, I know Mr. Harvey, I know he doesn't do what was built on River Neck Road, which let's leave it at that.
Okay.
And I agree, there's benefit, I'm willing to compensate the town for it.
Yeah. I think financially there are a lot of plus sides on this one. We're putting 8 units back on the tax rolls. We have no grinder pumps we have to take care of. I know you're affinity for grinder pumps. It provides, although not directly controlled by the town, and it is the North Chelmsford Water District, that loop. If it improves the quality of my water down, and then they next tip it over, I'm going to be happy about that. I like the idea of it coming off of Tobin rather than coming off of John. John is narrow. It's tough to park up there, especially when there's a soccer game going on. It's much more difficult a way in. I was happy to hear that it sounds like there wasn't very much opposition from the neighbors. It sounds like a good project. It's been approved conditionally approved by the planning board. Like I said, it increases money on the tax roll. It's always good. It does increase services, but yin and yang. You have the $30,000 coming in as a gift to the town for Varney. Varney could use updates on their playground equipment for sure. I'd like to see a move towards some more equipment like we have now at Friendship Park, some more revitalization at Varney, especially since it's so used in the summer. It'd be nice to help benefit that as the Vinyl Square Action Committee kind of increases and improves that area. Get a nice facelift. So I'm in favor of this one.
I'm in favor for all the reasons you said.
I would agree. These things to me come down to, are the neighbors
Yeah.
concern? And if it went through the postings and the hearings, and it sounds like nothing other than one potential comment was made with the infrastructure improvements, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah. Any further discussion?
If we approve this, and say he doesn't build, does that mean, and he sells it, does that mean someone else automatically gets it?
Well, I think the selectmen have the right, after the town meeting votes yea or nay, then the selectmen have the right
To word it.
then they've got to do something with the easement in addition to the town meeting vote. So if he doesn't build,
Then it's not like he can sell it with the easement on it to someone else who says, wants to build, I don't know, something else. But it would still have to go through the regular planning board, get approval and all of that, correct?
If they wanted to modify the plan, they'd
have to go
back before
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
And the selectmen would be authorized, but the selectmen could,
Could choose not to act.
All right, that's
Yeah.
fine.
put his own conditions
Mhm.
on what's.
Yeah, okay.
I.e., 101 Mill Road. Any further discussion?
Nope.
All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0. Moving right along, discussion of, discuss warrant booklet production and circulation. So we're not gonna do an actual book for this. It would be asinine, quite frankly. We have 3 articles to discuss. What I'll do is I'll try to type something up quickly, Pam, just for the 3. Anyone wants to add any additional information, I would appreciate someone who voted in the negative on Article 1 to provide me with their reasoning, and I'll place that into the letter. We'll circulate that. This is going to be a couple. We still have to put the voting procedures and everything like that. So we're talking like what, 9 pages maybe? What do you think, Pam?
Yeah,
9, 10.
9, 10 pages,
So is this something that can be produced through the town? I think, yeah.
We'll make copies.
Yeah. Okay. We'll send you the PDF and we'll go from there. Perfect. All right.
And when do we need to do that?
Well, we need to have it posted on the website by Monday.
Next Monday?
Yeah, this coming Monday.
Oh.
Yes.
It's coming up.
Yes, this coming Monday. This coming Monday is 1 week from date of death. So it's a quick turnaround, but it's only 3 articles.
Yeah,
So
4, isn't it 4?
well, yes, but we have no action on the 4th, on the 3rd rather. We'll have a vote at the night of town meeting, potentially. Okay. Moving along, discussion of town manager's draft fiscal year 2020 recommended operating budget and draft annual spring town meeting warrant articles.
Good evening again. Just to give you an overview, we have before you the 2020 fiscal year proposed operating budget and capital budget. It literally is warm off the press. As many of you may be aware, Governor Baker yesterday released his proposed state fiscal year 2020 operating budget. At the same time, he also released a plan to reform the Chapter 70 formula for the Commonwealth. Unfortunately, those plans were not made available until, I think he had released the report at 2 o'clock with the press release, and the release of the documents probably weren't posted to, what, 4:30? So we've been scrambling to get this thing out, and I also had a department head meeting in this room this morning to share with them to where we are. A couple things. One is on the Chapter 70, since it's timely. If you sort of had a chance to read it, basically it's I know Chelmsford has been fighting for 2 decades, right, Kathy, to get it reformed to Chapter 70. This isn't going to get us anywhere.
no, because it's based on the recommendations, and it's none
Right.
of those recommendations
And it's
helpful to Chelmsford at all.
Exactly. So that people have been fighting for years, and the coalition and all the other efforts, this is not going to satisfy them. Basically, what's going on here, the governor is not dedicating any new revenue source to funding this, and when he talks about $1 billion in education funding over 7 years, it's, that's cumulative. It's not annually, we're going to get $1 billion. And sort of it fell short. In fact, it's had mixed reviews thus far from the one day that it's been out. I think what you're going to see, much like you would expect, the legislature is going to take up, their own operating budget as well as their own reform bill. But I think the good news is there does seem to be finally movement and traction to get a education funding bill and reform bill out this legislative session, and my guess is it'll probably happen around the June, July timeframe. And so that's, but unfortunately, it didn't meet the aspirations that people had a year ago when they thought there was going to be this, constitutional amendment to put the, the surcharge on the high incomes and all that stuff, that, with the grand compromise, that all went away. So that sort of end result is what you see here in Chapter 70 for us is we get $20 per student, once again proposed by the governor, which is a rate of inflation that is less than, what, 0.1%. I mean, and you'll see it in the document. So the disappointing part, and also the governor last weekend was the Mass Municipal Association annual meeting. It sort of coincidentally coincides with the governor's budget release. He also announced at that time that he would level fund Chapter 90 funds at $200 million statewide, and it's been $200 million statewide, I think, for the last half dozen or 7 years. Although it's been acknowledged now that in order to maintain the roads, you really need over $600 million annually for investment. So there was disappointment there. But also more troubling in the budget is obviously there's a concern at the state level, probably the federal level, and probably the world level about what's happening with the economy. Clearly, we saw most recently the jitters in the stock market in December and earlier this month. Clearly, there's a global economic slowdown, most notably in China, which had always been the engine for the last decade or so, and you're seeing it in Europe. And then, and now with the governmental shutdown, you're certainly going to see it in the U.S. as well because of the implications to GDP as a result of not only the federal workers not working, but the contracted federal workers not moving forward. And there was already signs of a slowdown, with the Fed raising interest rates. And you can see the Fed quickly has pivoted. Everyone had anticipated there'd be more rate increases in the upcoming later months of this year, and now the Fed's almost at a neutral stance, saying, well, we're sort of monitoring things. So, long story short, the projected growth in the state budget is 2.7%, which is the lowest it's been in several years, and they don't foresee that changing. And then he also does propose some targeted tax. The big one he announced last Thursday at the Friday at the Mass Municipal Association was this deeds tax that would provide funding for climate change infrastructure investments. But that was, and then with the release of the education funding, he also did the Airbnb, if you recall, that legislation went through, and then some targeted, changes to the state sales tax on online purchases and opioids and so forth. So anyway, the bottom line is it's a mixed result. The other thing that's disappointing in the budget is he also level funded a number of state line items, particularly circuit breaker. So this current year, it's funded at 75%. The anticipation now, if that's level funded with the increasing cost of special ed, it'll be funded at a 70% reimbursement level. So again, this is a starting point. So with that as drawback, and really what holds us up is not only the Chapter 70 money and the unrestricted general government aid, which we knew would tie up to the 2.7% growth in the state budget, but also we needed to see what was being proposed in the cherry sheets in terms of tuition assessments. And he also made a change in the charter school tuition reimbursements, is that he knocked it down to a 3-year reimbursement level. And so you see a reduction in the cherry sheet line for charter school reimbursements. And again, we don't know where that's going to go. So what I've done in my budget to bring it to what's going on in Chelmsford is I foresee that the legislature will fund Chapter 70 above the governor's funding level. We've seen that happen in the last 3 years. I'm going with the trend. I mean, basically they increase it by 50% above the governor's level, or about 150,000. So that's the number I have built into my budget, and I think that's realistic what's going on out there. We're obviously monitoring things that are happening at the local level in terms of permit levels and most notably motor vehicle excise tax. We don't have the commitment yet out for the motor vehicle excise tax, but the early indications that John's hearing are we probably will have fewer motor vehicle excise tax bills than in prior years. Because we talked about this when we're doing the budget forecast and so forth, that we seem to have hit our peak. So with that, let me go into the budget. There are a few things that were rather dynamic. The most notable one is we are getting a level-funded health insurance premiums for the upcoming year. And again, that's not unique to Chelmsford, and it's not unique to Massachusetts or Blue Cross. What's happening is there's lower claims utilization for the last 12 to 18 month period. Even though healthcare costs are increasing, the utilization is decreasing. We also made some changes by moving. So what that's doing is, and it's really not explainable because it wasn't foreseen, and we don't know how long it's going to last. But it's provided us with at least a year's respite. So even the GIC, their premiums went up on average only 3.3%. So we're budgeting at 0%. And the other thing that helped us is we are growing our number of retirees, and we've noted that in the trends that John presented most recently at Fall Town Meeting. However, we migrated people off of, who weren't eligible for Medicare onto the Medicare plan, and that basically took them off of retiree HMO plans. So that basically we shifted the cost to the federal government by going to Medicare. So that has helped save us in the budget. All right, so bringing it, because I know your time's limited and you've got other things afterwards, and it's already 9 o'clock. Bottom line is we got a $137 million budget, which is about a 3.3% increase. As I indicated at the tri-board meeting in December, I'm budgeting the Chelmsford Public Schools at $61 million, which is a $2 million increase, or roughly 3.25%. The general government departments are up by, it's a $30 million budget, so we're roughly half of the school budget. That increase is $845K, or roughly 2.9%. Neshoba Tech assessment, we'll learn about that next Thursday, a week from today. I'm budgeting 2.7% increase, or $82,000, which is a rather modest increase. What's happened there is, and we saw it with the education numbers that came out yesterday with the governor's budget from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, as we had forecast, our enrollment percentage at Neshoba Tech has dropped by 1%. We were just over 30%, we're now just over 29%. So even though our enrollment declined and the district's enrollment declined, we actually fared better off this year. So that helps us. So there's only, again, a modest increase, as we know, in previous years. So it looks like that enrollment at Neshoba Tech is leveling off. Benefits and insurance, again, it's a $24.6 million budget, or I have a $1.2 million increase, or just over 5%. And the big story here, and you'll see that, is what I've chosen to do, and I seek your support, and obviously seek the support of the town meeting. I think I've done a responsible action by basically taking the monies that we had foreseen and targeted towards health insurance premiums, and basically taking that $500,000 and put it towards OPEB. And so therefore, we're meeting an obligation, or towards the obligation of not saddling those who are coming after us with this unfunded huge liability over the heads, much like we're bearing with that $8 million cost today of the unfunded pension liability. So taking the OPEB to $1.5 million, we can now see, hopefully a pathway out to at least having a credible plan of a schedule, much like we've had a pension schedule, of getting out under it. So I think it's a fiscally responsible way of taking advantage of an opportunity that's there before us. And the other good news is on debt service. The debt service is declining, both excluded and non-excluded debt. So we've got a $102,000 decrease in our debt service, roughly less than 1% of roughly $14 million. And the good news there is again, we're sort of paying down some of our prior, sewer obligations, notably on the debt service. So things are trending well, and you've seen the debt forecast when John presented at Fall Town Meeting. So again, my purpose here is not to read slides here, so I'll go rather quickly. We will talk about capital infrastructure. John's later on your agenda about capital. And the other big thing is, and I talked about this at the tri-board meeting, so again, I won't go into it, but I do have funded in here a full-time school resource officer at both the McCarthy and a full-time one at the Parker Middle School. So therefore, the high school, the Parker, and the middle school will each have their own full-time school resource officer, which again, I think is critical in terms of school safety, as well as addressing the needs of the youth and the climate at the schools. And the other big thing is I have incorporated in the budget, as I said I would at the December meeting, a community services coordinator. And again, it just meets those needs of residents who are falling in between the gaps. And again, the more I took advantage at the conference, municipal conference, and talked to some colleagues, and whether it's close as Acton and other communities, and I'm telling you, folks, there is a need there. It's a need that certainly is not going away, and again, we're hoping to, again, have somebody sort of coordinate this, and that's what it'll be a social worker, but we're not going to be a clinician. We're basically going to be the one, much like I said Regina does for veterans, who is the resource person. This person will be the resource person for families, youth, adults, seniors, and so forth, of pulling together the resources that are needed from things such as opioid issues, depression issues, hoarding, financial problems, Alzheimer's, dementia, so forth. It's really meant to be that gap, and we're looking forward to having that person on board at the start of the new budget year.
Is the theory behind that, Paul, that currently they come to multiple different departments of the town?
Yeah.
And they're not being,
They're being underserved.
basically
they're being
underserved, or
yeah.
they're creating a bottleneck where a bottleneck wouldn't normally be.
I mean, the problem that we're seeing now is we're expecting as a society, the school teachers to be the social workers and everything for the kids at the schools, from everything, and then we're sort of expecting the public safety officers and the Board of Health to be the social workers and everything on the community side, and quite frankly, they just don't have the follow-up. And that's what it comes down to, in terms of, we have a number of calls, and we talked about this morning at this table with the fire department, repeated calls to residents, I mean, in the dozens about.
The goal of kind of
the goal of
centralizing.
And
And
coordinating.
maybe decreasing and
And decreasing,
coordinating.
and getting the resources to others, so.
It's an efficiency move. Right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to, in my mind, warrant the increased expense here.
Yeah, because it's just, it's a burden, quite frankly. You're having unnecessary calls to public safety,
That's all I even know.
Board of
Yeah, thank
Health, that are just because of the fact that it's not being met. And honestly, people just don't know where to turn. So anyway, we'll go there. Again, the budget priorities stay the same from education, health, public safety. You see the budget line item changes, again, nothing sticks out to you other than the fact, the money continues to go to those big areas of schools, benefits, and again, notably in public safety and public works, and then notably the decline in debt service. And so that's really where these major expenditures are going to. Again, the police one, mind you, with the asterisk, we don't have the funding in for these sergeants, so that when that does come in, we'll adjust that and work with you. But again, the goal tonight is to get this out to you, because I know you want to get your liaison assignments and get out there and get your calendar booked to get your report out in the next 2 months. So that's sort of what's happening there. In the area of revenue, unfortunately, we get a 0.5% increase in state aid. If you look at the cherry sheet revenue numbers of less than $100,000, 0.54%. The big burden, again, all comes from the property tax, and available funds is really the implementation of benefits and other indirect costs that go into the budget, particularly now that we're running a stormwater enterprise and so forth. So that's not really new available funds, it's sort of the flow of funds. And again, as I noted on slide 8, again, the governor only proposed a minimum of $20 per student, so we'd get $100,000 or 0.92%. So less, again, it's not even keeping pace with inflation. And then unrestricted general government aid, again, the growth of the budget, 2.7% to $5.4 million. And I already mentioned about the other aspects of it. Again, the allocation, just sort of goes where you expect to go. Our biggest operations are public schools, and then benefits and insurance and debt service, and then you get into the budget lines.
Benefits insurance is about, a third to a half used for the schools.
Yeah, exactly. And then the 5-year expenditure comparison, again, it shows you that, where have we made the investments, you'll see it in 10 as well, the investments go to the large operations, schools. We've invested $10 more million in schools over the last 5 years, $2.25 million in public safety and $6 million in benefits. Percentage-wise, there really is nothing out of whack there. And when you look comparison, although kind of the DPW looks like it may be a little underfunded if you look percentage-wise. 10 years, you sort of see the same trends. And obviously, the big investment, percentage-wise, has been community services. We've added the health inspector, we've added the community services coordinator. So that's why you see that number jumping up so significantly. But it's got a small base to begin with. And so again, the schools have a $61 million budget, or an increase of 3.27%. I provide on slide 13 all the funding increases for the schools over the last decade. I think this is responsible with what's going on. And then I also show you most notably on slide 14 the disappointing level of support from the state Chapter 70 formula. As you can see, I don't even put in the 2020 yet because it's not final, but you can see going into this year, if it were to stay at that, paltry amount, it would be the lowest we've ever seen. But you can see, we're certainly not even keeping pace with inflation, never mind, special ed costs or other real costs of education. And then what I do is I provide, and you've seen some of this at fall, and I provide this for those who may not have seen the fall discussion, but, again, you look at comparable towns, we're really not misaligned, although Westford sort of stands as the outlier, that they have the enrollment that we do, higher per capita income, higher per capita equalized valuation per capita, but yet they get, $17 million in Chapter 70 to our 11.
And they've got their own funding issues they're dealing with currently.
Yeah, exactly, despite an override.
That overrun of
Override,
money
yeah.
that they're receiving, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll see what's happening. Again, you see that on slide 16, the required net school spending under the governor's proposal would increase by $2.3 million to $53.6 million. Obviously, we're well above that by about 36% or so, but it's just interesting to note how the growth in net school spending under the governor's formula, again, doesn't really benefit us.
Well, actually, what that points out to is the net school spending is
It's
just
not a meaningful, right,
it's ridiculous.
it's not a meaningful
Yeah.
characterization
I
of
don't
it.
know why they use it anymore, quite frankly.
Right,
I
right.
mean,
Let's just scratch that line
See.
item.
Per pupil expenditure, you can see that despite the fact that the year-end reports are in, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has not released the 18 numbers yet. I keep checking as recently as today to see if they're out there, but clearly we're over $15,000 per student. So when I'm here at the table saying, yeah, we're going to have 3-bedroom with expenses, I'm not, trying to be difficult, I'm just trying to say, hey, look, one kid's
It's gonna be a
$15,000,
wash,
yeah. So that's all. Per pupil, as you can see, it's not insignificant. I think sometimes when people see their tax bill, they, you got to look at it in context. Again, you see the comparisons, and I think the interesting thing is it's mostly in the graph, which I like on 20 as opposed to 19, because some people see things graphically. You can see Chelmsford right in the middle in per pupil expenditure with these, but these are the DESE listed Department of Elementary Secondary Education listed of comparable communities. Chelmsford, you can see, is right in the middle there, right next to Westford in terms of per pupil expenditure, but certainly not as much of the way Tewksbury sort of seems, and Billerica, you see they're spending more per pupil, which is interesting. You can see this is a very costly area per pupil expenditure-wise. If you look at special ed circuit breaker, this one is peculiar. And again, I pointed out just the insights because I would have thought that one of the things of school reform was they were going to recognize the cost of special education. And you can see here, we're an extraordinary community compared to our peer communities of special ed. I mean, just look at that net reimbursement or our claims. They're almost double our peer communities. Even the number of eligible, 92. How is it that we have the same enrollment as places, and
Billerica,
Billerica, I mean, Billerica's like a third. And I know, Kathy, even when you were on the school committee, people talked about people send their schools to Chelmsford
Yeah.
for special ed. There seems to be some validity to this from, again, these aren't my numbers, these are the numbers from the state's website.
then
and-
people would say, oh, no, everybody says they send their kids to other
Yeah.
towns for special ed,
But-
but it just,
Yeah, and if you look at the chart below, aside from Walpole, Chelmsford is the highest in this group of peers as recognized as comparable communities to Chelmsford by the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. I can't understand why Billerica is that low, but yet Tewksbury's close to us, but still not at that level where we're at.
Send
So,
us, that's why.
yeah, anyway, so it's,
Because,
and I'm not being, this is not a judgment on special education. It's just, you wonder, what is it
there
that's?
is gonna be some
what's
sort of
going-
anomaly.
And I don't know if this is true or not, because I don't know the numbers, but
Yeah.
I've always heard from
Yeah.
friends that I have who live in Billerica, like, you send your kids to school, elementary, middle school, and then you send them to private for high school. And one of your costs that go up for special education is when, kids start hitting walls and are not progressing, and that's when it all comes out. So they don't come out necessarily when they're little, in, the elementary, they start hitting middle school and high school. So I kind of wonder whether or not, when you look at, like, when you say Billerica.
Those are affected by the private.
By
Wow.
the migration out, like,
Maybe.
that's,
We can check, yeah.
and
yeah.
again, I've just,
So it's,
But
it
I
would,
think this 92 is students that are going out of district. I mean, I think
circuit breaker, right, circuit
Yeah.
breaker eligible.
So-
Yeah, these are people being
these are-
sent.
this isn't, I have something that can be handled within the school district, or I have the IEP. This is, I'm going to a school for something.
right, but
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying, like, a lot of.
But it wouldn't matter where you live, though. You
Doesn't matter.
shouldn't matter. If you lived in Chelmsford or Tingsboro or Westford, they
Right.
would still send you probably to the same collaborative for that service.
Or, but, and again, like, you usually see this, and it becomes a necessity when they start hitting
Yeah.
the higher
Right. And I kind of stumbled upon this. I mean, it's not like this thing jumps out of the chart. I kind of was milling through data.
Yeah.
And jumped out at me like, what's going on?
It's huge.
Anyway,
It's interesting, though, what you're
it's
saying.
interesting. I wish there was
I have a
some,
whole bunch of theory on this person.
We'll save that for later.
okay, we'll save it for later. All right.
Yeah.
We can talk later.
All right, slide 23 shows our enrollment. Obviously, we got declining enrollment,
But one
it's
thing I would
a
say about
student-teacher
the,
ratio, but again, it's, yeah, go ahead.
the state of Massachusetts
Yep.
is gonna decline, I mean, people are leaving.
Oh, yeah, there's no question.
And there is declining
Enrollment
people
everywhere.
of this age. So when we say our enrollment has gone down, say from 10 years ago,
Yeah,
it has,
but
but so is
most everybody else.
almost
That's correct.
everybody in
Yeah, I think there were only like
Massachusetts
8
has, too,
communities
so.
who had increased enrollments. But it just, but yet but it goes to the issue of class size and student-teacher ratio, because even though our enrollment's going down, our number of teachers are going up, and our student-teacher ratio is declining. And then, again, if you look at the slide on 25, the student-teacher ratio from the DESI peers, once again, Chelmsford is sort of we're not in the middle, we're towards the low end. And yet, interesting enough, Billerica in that instance has lower student-teacher ratio than Chelmsford. And yet a place like, it's just interesting to, that the data that comes out at you in terms of, what's going on. We have a better ratio than Westford,
That's amazing.
so it's, significantly, you can see Westford's towards the right of the chart, we're towards the left. And average class size,
But that number also includes paraprofessionals, it
yeah,
includes.
but it just, so it makes,
So this includes paraprofessionals.
Yeah,
Right.
oh, yeah.
So if you have higher special
one
needs.
would
This
think.
doesn't correlate
right.
with class size, this
Right, but
correlates with. the
paraprofessionals and
overall-
staff.
Ratio,
Right.
right.
But one would think that if one community was struggling with their budget, you would
Well,
think,
yeah,
you would think it would be reversed.
No, I understand.
You would think we'd be saying, oh, Chelmsford's under-investing in the professionals and the educators, and therefore you have a budget crisis, but almost you have the opposite happening. So anyway, it's just interesting data that came across. Again, they haven't released data for even fiscal year 18 in terms of class size. So all I had is a 17 class size. And again, you can see Chelmsford's at the far left of the average class size. We were the smallest, 18.1. And again, Billerica's right there with us, at 18.2. But again, you just see Tewksbury is at the other end at 20.5, and Westford at 18.9.
And this is one way to take a grain of salt, because you have these high school classes that have smaller enrollment, and
Right.
they're included in that calculation.
Right.
So
You can't.
But
that's the problem with these are imperfect,
Right,
imperfect numbers for.
Right, it's an imperfect match, but it also gives you a sense is that you shouldn't be sitting on the edge of your seat thinking the district's in financial collapse, because what you're saying is they might have some room to adjust if things tighten up.
But even some of the other school districts, right, they've had, I don't know if Reading's on here, but they've created the middle school and the high school, like they make it one, so then they have shared services, like they have the shared library, so then like their numbers become skewed, right?
Right,
So
but
you start
this
having-
goes into class size,
Well,
average
yeah,
class
but-
size, right?
Right, but if you're adding, your PE and, like, if you can make those efficiencies because you have one large building that services one side of the high school, one side of the middle school.
Yeah.
We have 2 middle schools.
Right.
We don't have 1 middle school, right? Like, so it.
We have
all-
2 middle schools.
Anyway.
These numbers are just teachers, right? They're not.
No, they're licensed teaching
Right,
professionals.
No paraprofessionals or
Right,
anything like
it's
that.
licensed teachers,
That'd
that's
be
correct.
interesting to look
Yeah.
at,
Yeah,
the
I just,
distribution of tasks with the para.
I don't have that data available, you'd have to really mine.
It just, sometimes you have to be careful with these
Right.
numbers.
Exactly.
Like, you
That was
really
my
have,
point.
you can't just make
Right.
a general,
Right.
because other towns could have, less buildings, like, whatever.
Yeah, at
It'd
the
be
same.
more efficient.
But at the same time too, these are standards that are used by the state, and therefore
Right.
that's how they.
When they look at district profiles, it actually makes Chelmsford an attractive community to come to, and probably keeps your property values, because it's
Yeah.
very well impressed,
No
because
one
people
can
look at.
accuse
'cause
us
people-
of not spending
Right.
money on our kids.
Right, because they will look at what's the
Okay.
class size, what's their,
I would say
Yeah.
that if you go through the Chelmsford Public School System, you're gonna be happy with the results.
Absolutely.
yeah.
And also, interestingly enough, even though it costs us 15 or 16 grand a person, the only way we're gonna get more money from the state is if we increase our student population.
Right, yeah,
I
sadly.
mean, so that's kind of a
But-
twist.
Yeah. Right, they are
The only
rewarding
way you're
growth.
ever gonna get more than $20
They reward growth. Right,
a person is if your enrollment goes
Yep,
up.
that's correct, yeah. Right.
Yay, chapter 70.
So, moving on to Neshoba Tech, you can see I'm forecasting roughly 3.125. I think that's roughly where it is, looking at prior budgetary rate growth increase and the fact that we lose 1% on the enrollment. Again, our enrollment, you can see it went down by 12 students from 198 to 186 this year, but again, the district's enrollment went down again, and we'll get that packet out next Thursday, and we'll get it out to everybody.
I think Denise said that the 6 of those were the graduate students, too.
Yeah.
Teasing me?
No, I'm just making an observation, Kathy.
Three, there might be three. I think I came across three. The interesting part on slide 31 is you can see their per pupil expenditure, jumped significantly from 16 to 17. That was $1,000. And again, I'm sure their end of the year report is, but we haven't seen 18. But you're right, you're looking at $20,000 to send a kid to voc school.
Right.
When people talk about sending a kid to college, right, UMass or one of these other places, I mean, it's.
Then again, the
it's-
dual-edged sword, when we use
It's-
our average numbers, we're including all the
Because
elementary,
elementary,
middle
which is
school.
low,
in there.
right,
So
but I think-
our numbers look lower for
Right.
public schools, but
Because
in the
it's-
actuality, it's because
it's-
we're including the entire student
Right.
population.
But it just goes to,
Exercise, just to see how.
it's just good to see.
Right ahead.
But it's good to see, because it just goes to show you what it costs to educate a kid, and I think sometimes.
It's very expensive.
Sometimes people, they get choked up on college costs, well, it's because they're not
They
cutting
aren't paying the
a
public
tuition
schools,
bill
yeah.
for a public school.
Well, they
but-
are,
But they're paying in their
indirectly, yeah.
taxes, but I think.
Indirectly, yeah.
But indirectly, all right, so anyway, moving on to public safety, again, we're at now, it would be 70 full-time employees, again, because we've added the school resource officer, so that 53 went to 54, everything else stayed the same. You can see the call volume on slide 33 went up considerably, where the chief will come in and he'll discuss it with you. The good news is there are violent crimes, and we talked about this at department head this morning. Violent crimes, robberies and so forth are declining, assaults, so forth. But there are increasing demand in medical calls as the community ages as well, and other calls in general. So you can see they had over 35,000 response calls. So again, you think you think about it. If you've got 365 days in a year and you've got 35,000 calls, you can see they're responding roughly to 100 calls a day. So it's interesting in terms of volume.
Yep.
And again, the fire staffing level is the same as as per the budget and the recent contract award. We have the funding in there for the overtime. You can see on slide 35, you can see the fire call volume. You can see that went up significantly as well. They're now at over 7,218. So you saw an increase in call response for police and fire. Again, medical being a big determinant of this. So baking in the budget, we've baked into all the budgets the employee pay schedules for non-union employees, and obviously we don't have all the agreements expire at June 30th on the town and the school side, so there's no, when those agreements come in, they'll be brought to town meeting either the spring or the fall. Again, nothing
We
has been.
just finished those?
We just finished that, exactly. Again, the story on Middlesex County retirements, I won't dwell on it. We have a $500,000 increase, of 6.52%. So now our payment to Middlesex would be $9.5 million $8.9 million, going up to 9.5 in '21. And you can see, and this goes to this issue, the payment on the unfunded liability is $7.6 million roughly. And so again, that's the motivation as to why we don't want to continue to dig the hole on the OPEB if we can avoid it. So again, we're meeting that assessment. Fortunately, the next actuarial evaluation for Middlesex won't be for another year, so the fact that this past stock year got nothing, we won't see that impact, and they do tend to smooth it out. So, again, 39 reminds you of the unfunded pension and OPEB liabilities, and again, we have the $7.556 million assessment for the unfunded pension liability, and we have $1.5 million appropriation towards the unfunded OPEB liability. So you can see you've almost got over $9 million going towards these unfunded liabilities of the town. Again, our debt service is good, as we know, and we've seen this before. Debt is low in terms of the value of the town, and 87% of it's going to be paid off in 10 years, and it short answer is because we don't have a school project on the books, which is really the big thing that will turn that upside down when and if that time comes. You can see the non-excluded debt, again, it's a decrease nominal of $8,300, so it's essentially flat. Excluded debt, drops by $84,000 or 1.95%. So that's all in the numbers. We do have an increase by 4 general government employees from the budget we presented a year ago, and then just want to remind folks, we have, as of February 1st, there's the OSHA Safety Compliance Officer, provisions become effective February 1st. They were doing interviews today. I think we were at 18 applicants for that position, so that goes into the count for 20, as well as the additional health inspector we added last fall into 20, school resource officer and community services coordinator. Again, the revenue sources, the allowed 2.5% increase is 2.4 million, 1.6 projected new growth, and then we do have almost 100,000 decrease in excluded debt. So that's where you get the 3.9 roughly, and then you can see the 0.54% in state aid is lost at $100,000, and then the available funds. Again,
Why would you ever hire an OSHA?
because you know why?
Why?
It's a huge liability for the town.
Yeah, I
What is
understand that.
what is going to happen is you're required, as of February 1st, we're required to do training and record keeping for across the town, from schools to DPW trenches to fire departments to police and to custodians, ladders, what have you. And the concern is that as soon as an incident happens, and it will happen, you will not only be borne by the inspections from OSHA, but you're also going to be exposed to the liability by the party that is injured. Basically saying that the results of my injury were the fact that the town was negligent in meeting its obligations under OSHA, and so.
Why wouldn't you hire a consultant?
Well,
And train
Because-
train all your managers?
because it's continual training. We are going to be training year-round. This isn't a case where we come in, do an assessment with a consultant, and in 4 months they're gone. This is going to be perpetual. In terms of, you will have training schedules where 1 week they're going to be at the fire department, the next week they're going to be at DPW, the next week they're going to be in the schools, the next week they're going to be with the custodians at the senior center. This is continuous training and record keeping. Unfortunately, that it's just never ending. And sadly, I mean, I wish it were something where you come in, you had somebody look at your books as a consultant and said, okay, you're clean, you're audited, you're on your way. This is ongoing training that unfortunately, it's going to be scrutinized, because what's going to happen is there are going to be state inspectors from the Department of Labor standards, and they're going to come in, and when an incident happens, and again, we've seen this with some of the environmental issues in the past, that then becomes a revenue source also to fund their operations. And so it's unfortunate, but we will be in a, much like, we have a need continually for a business manager or everything else. We need somebody whose sole job is accident investigation, accident prevention, and training, and documentation on everything. It's basically, if we're not going to pay it this way, we're going to pay it in liability.
I guess that I understand. But is this something that we could share with a couple of other communities? Are we allowed to do that?
You're allowed to, and if we were a smaller town, that's what I would propose we would do. If I'm sitting in Tingsboro, or if I'm sitting in Carlisle, I would say, yes, do that. I think the enormity of the task, where we have hundreds of employees in the general government side, and then, over 500 in the school side, this is going to be continuous training where one day, as I said, they'll be with the school cafeteria workers, they'll be with the school custodians, they'll be with the stage people at the Performing Arts Center, they'll be with the stage people at the PAC. This is just going to be, a continuous process that yes, I would share it. I think the burden is so big that we're going to be stretched just doing it on our own. That I can't see us like having an OSHA compliance officer with Bill Ricker or Westford. It's that significant, and especially where there's a new law, and also I think the problem is the trends in society. Years ago, somebody slipped and fall, you say, oops, that's a problem. Nowadays, you slip and fall, it's the property owner's problem.
I get a phone call.
Yeah. So so that's where we're going. It just reflects the times, unfortunately. So we'll see how it plays out. And, we'll keep you updated in terms of the progress and training that's going on. I can tell you our insurer is all on top of this because, they don't want to be handling the claims either. So they're putting out tremendous amount of material and contact people and so forth to.
A break on our premiums?
Yeah. Yeah, you will be, by basically doing, best practices and so forth. So it also affect your experience mod,
Yep,
which would
true.
affect your premiums. Going into revenue comparison, you can see that over 77% of our budget comes from the property tax. So it'd be $106 million. And again, state aid is declining now to less than 13%. And you can see, go back over the years, it's too bad. You can see that at the end of the 10-year, in 10 years, we've had a 21% increase in Chapter 70 funding, which again, isn't even keeping pace with inflation. And if you notice between the 5 and the 10, you see the decline. The increase in Chapter 70 funding over the last 5 years is just over 8.25%. In the last 10 years, it's 21%. So you can see the more recent years, we're getting short funded on Chapter 70. And obviously that didn't change with what just happened yesterday with the governor's proposal. So again, with the derivative is the property tax, and we break out, as we've done traditionally, how your $7,000 property tax bill gets distributed amongst the schools, benefits and insurance, and so forth, across the community on slide 48. Again, slide 49, you've seen the valuation. Slide 50 is the up-to-date data in terms of what happened to our ranking on average single-family property tax bill as a result of the selectmen splitting the bill. You can see our rank dropped from 65 to 73. The bill dropped obviously from $71.75 to $7,003. And obviously we
8
saw
whole slots, look at that.
we went down to 73, which is the lowest obviously we've been since 2009. And you can see the 5-year increase is rather modest of only 14.45%. Obviously, the big part being this split this year. If you look, and everything now gets skewed as a result of the fact that we're splitting, because now if you go to slide 51, we would have the lowest increase in the average single-family property tax bill of our surrounding communities over the last 5 fiscal years. But obviously, we're second highest in terms of total bill behind Westford. And then state aid, again, you can just see the modest increase of less than, and the one that's, again, as I mentioned earlier, if you see the charter tuition reimbursement almost cut by a third, it went from $278 to $107,000. So that's sort of, well, what happened, Paul? We got an extra, and again, that's my estimate. The 11.2 is not the governor's. That's my estimate of where I'm thinking would be. His number was 50,000 less than that. And everything else is from the cherry sheets. And you can see the schools did reduce their charter school student enrollment, because you can see their charter school choice tuition went down by 100,000, almost a quarter, from 377 to 287. And we did get a tick in of the veterans benefits. Again, those lag a year behind. And we are, so it's, again, just a modest increase. And then the local receipts, as we talked about in the past, we have no projected increase in local receipts because again, we think we've peaked. And again, the largest number of this, or roughly half of it, is motor vehicle excise. And so what's going to happen is, I think when John gets the final numbers, you'll see that the first commitment was less than the prior year, and then what we see happening over the course of the year, you will see your subsequent commitments declining, because it won't be the volume of turnover in automobiles to the level that we had, and again, we think the peak was fiscal year 18. So we'll see where that goes. The big thing is permits. Permits are holding strong, both in terms of number of permits, so that really, which is the second largest funding area. So that's important. And again, slide 54 shows you the history of motor vehicle excise. Again, we're within a week or so, we'll get you out that when it comes out, but you can see that the trend has been upwards on the average bill and the number of bills. What we think we're going to see is the number of bills go down slightly, and be interested to see what the average bill is. Again, available funds, the big new one there is the bottom line. Stormwater Enterprise is the big source there, because we're now funding, the Stormwater Enterprise, so that therefore those benefits for those employees get pushed into our budget. And then obviously the notable one on slide 56 with inflation, as you can see, inflation running high, 3.2% through November. Again, that's Boston CPI. You can see the trend, obviously, in latter years has been higher inflation, although it'll be interesting to see with fuel costs and food, what happens in the year ahead. And then, I won't spend any time on this because John's going to later on, but we then close the report with the capital funding of $3.4 million. And again, I think the last two slides are, again, the way to hopefully alter this trend is this, there is an opportunity, it's going to happen, is this fighting for revisions in the Chapter 70 formula. Again, the last time this legislature did this was in 1993, so they don't do it all that often. So again, if people are motivated, now's the time to weigh in with the legislative delegation, because if they do it now, they're not going to take it up probably in any of our tenure here at this table, at Finance Committee or in the community. And then again, we're not hearing any mention at this point in terms of OPEB reform. And we're hoping that with the governor and the second administration, that this will come up in the next year or two, because something has to give there in terms of, the obligation. And again, the thought would be to mirror it similar to the pension, where your benefit is not fixed, for one size fits all, but is it's somehow influenced by the, years of service and age at level. So that's the budget. You have the detailed document by departments, and again, I've highlighted the summaries. Again, most of the, issues we've covered, and I think, we're solid. I think, going forward, 6 months from now, the assessors will conclude their new growth and where we are as a community. Fortunately, we're seeing some things coming online, as much as you're seeing what's happening on Turnpike and in Center behind, by the rail trail, behind Brickhouse Pizza. And then we're starting to see movement, and you heard mentioned earlier, or you may have heard, we'll hear it later. We're starting to see some significant interest on 129, and we think the benefits thing may get pushed across the goal line if we address with this drive-through issue for quality foods, what's being proposed, basically the Panera type of institutions that, the concern when the bylaw was developed is they didn't want it to become Drum Hill with, the fast food. And so now that you sort of have this game changer in recent years of this quality fast food, for lack of a better term, where it's, you'd be typical places that you would actually sit and dine in with silverware and so forth, but have a fast food component. And the Economic Development Committee has sat and heard a proposal along 129 and a couple others, and we think it will happen. And it's really contingent upon that provision.
Do we know what institutions are interested?
I don't know if I want to say them publicly, but we do know who they
hoping
are.
it might slip, okay.
No, I won't want to let it slip because, we don't want to tip off one of our neighbors.
No, I
and have them
understand.
steal them out from under
I
us.
I
understand.
guess the question is,
But
would we eat there or would we not?
No, I think you would eat there. I mean, yes. Yeah, and I think that's what it is it's what this, like this quality, fast food type of situation where people don't want to get out of the car. And I think the first step was when they had the drive-in spots where you'd come in and they bring the food out to you. Now it's sort of evolved to a drive-through window.
Yeah,
So much like the 99 you'd go to.
Yeah, or there's a place like, Prest up in Nashua, which has a drive-through, that has recently expanded into Massachusetts, and they're looking to expand other ways.
Right, those type of places, yeah. Which is not what, it's not the traditional,
Right.
Ronald McDonald things that you saw when you were a kid saying, oh, that's fast food. It's like you said, it's a level above that.
Good.
So, anyway, thank you for your time. Alan, if you have any questions.
Just briefly
there's a
on
lot of data.
the warrant articles, Paul.
Yeah.
I know you just briefly talked about the,
Oh, yeah, I can go through that. The warrant itself,
it's not finalized, obviously.
it's not finalized, and it will be signed at the board's second meeting in February. You can see, you go through the first,
It's all-
17 articles of the
Yeah.
warrant. They're the standard articles from the operating budget. I mean, the Shobotech, one thing I will point out, they will be coming in for an MSBA expedited repair project, you know,
The roof.
for the roof, windows, and door replacement, so that will be presented next week. So they asked us to save a placeholder, that's Article 5. Again, the rest are all the operating budgets, reserve fund. The reserve fund is funded now at the 400 level, I should have probably noted that.
Thank you. Okay,
So
good
that's
to know.
back to the 400,000 level in the budget. You got all your enterprise funds, your capital budget. There is a request on the sewer enterprise capital for the Progress Avenue sewer pump station upgrade, and as well as a sewer system inflow and infiltration assessment. That's basically, the system's at the age now is where you have inflow, outflow, basically leaks in the pipes that you want to address to prevent loss and environmental. In fact, it's required by the state to do this type of testing and reporting. And then you've got your enterprise funds.
Do we know how the Forum Ice Rink is tracking?
So
currently?
far, so good. You know, the new management, everything has gone well. And then the annual revolving funds. And then the increased funding for the senior citizen property tax work-off program. What's happening in there is two things. One is in the spirit of providing assistance for residents. As you know, we go to town meeting to set that cap, and it's been several years since we last went there. The cap right now is $100,000, and with the minimum wage now being $11 per hour, we're down. We got about 150 participants, so they're earning roughly about $670 some odd dollars when you do the math. My proposal is increase that by $50,000 to make that $150,000 for the senior work program, which at the age next year would be, it goes up $1 again, so you roughly would have $1,000 per 150 people. It's 150,000. They'd roughly work about 80 hours to earn that. Again, I just think it sort of speaks to the whole issue of providing some assistance as well as circuit breaker and others. 19, the cemetery improvement fund, that's and the community action program, and then community preservation articles.
There's a project now that they're
They're
working
looking to do a facade and signage improvement program that's under development.
Okay.
And then you see the zoning articles. One would be the drive-through restaurants along 129. What had been the domestic animals and chickens, hopefully that gets taken care of.
Well, based upon the vote tonight, it could
Might
be,
not.
it could come back in the
Come back
spring.
again. Let's hope,
Yeah.
let's hope it
Good
not.
luck, guys.
And then there's the Groton Road Route 40 zoning, they're still ongoing, and even the historical bylaw, you remember that failed in the fall, that's under review again. And then we'd have street acceptances, so at this point, less than 30 articles, and we'll see where things pan out as
Now,
we
do we
go forward.
anticipate with the presentation of the drive-through restaurants there to be more discussion as to what might actually be going in? Like a dartboard we could throw at?
Yeah, I think they'll give an illustration.
More information
Yeah, they'll
as
give
to
more
what's going to look
information.
like and what's going to...
Yes,
Okay.
oh yeah, and that's been shared. What they don't want, but you won't see the name of the
Yeah, because
establishment. but-
they're concerned about poaching, I get that.
Yeah, one of the properties is 330 Billerica Road. If you go down right by the Route 3, it's one of the old Kronos buildings. That's a property that's been under consideration. We've met with those folks. They came to the Economic Development Commission. They showed a plan of basically replacing the facade of the building and then having the drive-through, so using the existing road cut. So by the time you got to the drive-through, it wasn't gonna be like Chelmsford Street where you'd be backed out into
Yeah.
the roadway. It was well thought of and
Great.
so forth, so yes, you will see that at town meeting.
Perfect.
So that will be coming.
Thank you, Paul.
All right, so thank you, and I guess we can turn it over to John for capital.
Hi, John.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Finance Committee.
Sure.
I'd like to give you a quick summary of I have a short presentation on the FY20 capital plan. The Capital Planning Committee finished its meetings back in December, and they reviewed 24 projects totaling $4.9 million. I should point out, a lot of this information will be familiar to Kathy. Kathy served, as you know, as the representative from the Finance Committee and attended all the
Kathy.
meetings.
Welcome, I enjoy it immensely. John, you run it very well organized. Do an excellent job.
Thank you for saying that. We enjoy having you. This first slide just shows the capital plan that's been recommended by functional area, and you see that the major categories are public safety, that's the fire department. As we'll see, that's for the purchase of a new fire engine. That accounts for about 21%. Public works accounts for 28%. And then school facilities and school technology account for about 30%. The total of all the capital projects that are recommended is just over 3.47 million. We have about 70,000 in recaptured funds and bond premiums. It's kind of a combination. That will defray slightly the amount that we would borrow to fund it to 3.4 million that you see at the bottom. We'll take a look at some of the areas for each project, just to give you a quick highlight on some of them. The first one is technology. One of the things our technology department's been doing is working in concert with the police department. And one of the things with technology advancing, been adding cameras in various locations around town. And when you record that much video, you need the infrastructure to support all that. And with the addition of, we're now at the point where our camera server, we cannot add any additional cameras. And we also, our technology department's looking at doing some firewall upgrade, adding some switches, various things that support that. So this will allow them to continue to, have the infrastructure to support additional cameras.
I think you can see that as a trend. I mean, if you notice what happened with that 23-year-old student in Boston, how they identified the
Yeah.
Yeah,
Amazing.
that was
cameras.
amazing.
It's
huh?
cameras at the subway station.
They were able to follow everything, yeah.
Yeah, and we hope that day doesn't come here, but where we have them now at our beaches and parks and conservation lands and buildings,
There's a lot more reviewable
there's a lot
data.
more reviewable data out there that's,
Just a
it's,
quick question, John,
Sure.
on the servers. This is us buying servers.
Yes.
We don't use, I assume someone looked at like utilizing cloud instead of buying hardware?
We do on occasion lease servers, or we've done like lease options on them. In this case, I know our technology staff looked at it and felt that it was, they
But
want.
no, I mean like the cloud, like the Amazon cloud and stuff,
Well,
like.
it's also sensitive data and there's a lot of it.
Yeah, I know, I'm just because I
Yeah.
know the trend in industry has been, even security companies, right, are utilize the clouds to do all their computations. We don't buy servers anymore, right? Like, it's we have a couple and then it's all.
There's concerns over the security of that, though, and that's become more
No,
prevalent in
I'm
the last.
and I don't know, from
Yeah.
a, government perspective and whether it's, how much that would cost, because it's obviously, it's an operating expense that eats into the budget versus a capital.
Yeah, I can discuss that with them. I know that on some of our other servers, we've looked at leases, and in some cases, it's been, advantageous to do that. The next area involves archival storage in this building, and the photo you see is actually, this is a project that's been led by our town clerk. And the photo that you see there is actually in a storage room that was redone in the basement level. The next phase will be 2 storage rooms. It will involve removing the shelving, installing much better lighting, also some software for management and retrieval of records. The shelves that are installed in the 2 storage rooms will not look like this in the photo, but it's just to show you that if you've ever had a chance, if you talk to Tricia, she can give you the tour. That room has been greatly enhanced in the basement and much better organized than it ever was.
More efficient.
Much more efficient. The next involves our public library. This may look familiar. This is Phase 2. This is intended to recarpet the children's room, some of the lower levels. And so what we had to do, with funding being limited, obviously we'd like to do it all in one phase if we couldn't, but this is kind of a compromise where this is Phase 2 for them. So this is a $50,000 to allow them to complete that next phase of work.
Are there more phases after that?
Be one more phase, I believe.
This discussion we had a couple of years ago, and the concern was the availability of the tiles and the color matching, and the discussion was that if they're separate rooms, they don't necessarily need to color match. This is how they kind of broke it down.
And then the next project involves the fire department. We heard from Chief Ryan. This involves replacing engine 4. As you see, the current engine's a 2007. And as the chief explained, with those kind of hours, he actually drew an analogy to it being almost like if it was a car, having like 120,000 miles, even though it doesn't have basically, it's reaching the end of its life. And so what this project will do is allow him to purchase a newer engine, and then the current engine 4 will be then transitioned to a reserve engine. So he will have, at least that will give him another reserve engine that will help keep the fleet updated. And next area is Public Works. 2 infrastructure-type projects. We have sidewalk construction and road improvements. The sidewalk construction and road improvements a grand total of $675,000. The sidewalk project is going to involve repairs along the Davis Road area and some other projects. Also, the road improvements, as you know, they're based on that pavement management survey that was done. That's in the process of being updated. The roads right now that were explained to the Capital Planning Committee that are on the agenda to be done include Parkerville Road, Arbutus, Walnut, Chestnut, Spruce, and Maple Road, a section of Maple Road.
You have a road named after a tree.
Yeah.
You're in good shape.
There are a lot of roads in town that are named after trees.
Then moving on to Public Works vehicles, there are 3. The first is a heavy-duty 10-wheel truck. You can see the age of that. It's currently inoperable. It's not able to pass inspection. That's at a cost of $213,000. There's a 1-ton pickup truck that's sort of has a flatbed body that you see that has over 120,000 miles on it and is in poor condition. The cost to replace that is $70,000. And then finally, there's a 1-ton dump truck plan for the cemetery department at a cost of $56,000. That has over 80,000 miles and extensive corrosion that is used for cemetery and DPW plowing operations. Next, moving on to municipal facilities. This project, a cost of $425,000, involves the replacement of the roof of the building that we're all gathered in tonight. The current age of the roof is about 23 years old, and as everyone knows that frequents this building, the roof sustained some damage last winter in a storm, and there were some repairs done, but due to its age and that, we've experienced a lot of leaking and some water damage. So this will go a long way in.
The flat roof.
Yeah, the flat roof.
It's a school building. And, this is built as a school building, so it's a lot of different areas.
Next, there are 2, and there's an equipment and a vehicle project for municipal facilities. The first is the purchase of a 3/4-ton pickup that will be equipped for snow plowing. It replaces an older electrician's van that has over 90,000 miles on it. The cost of that is just over $45,000. The next item is a specialized piece of equipment that's used to put down the stripes and on all the athletic fields, and also to grooming means that, they use it to drag in fields, get the fields ready for play, and that's shown in the photo on the right. There'll also be attachments so they can apply, fertilizer or chemicals, and that's just under $29,000.
All subject to the water regulations, of course.
Yes. Then moving on to school facilities, the first project involves the Harrington Elementary School at a cost of $205,000. This is to add some much-needed parking spaces at the school. And as we heard testimony, this is going to greatly alleviate the need for folks to park along Richardson Road during school hours.
Where are they putting the parking?
That was my question. Thank you.
They're going to redesign the lot, and you can see in this, that was my understanding, that see out front there, it shows the grassy area there in front of the school. I believe they're going to restripe and
Bump it out
redesign the
further.
lot,
Yeah.
so that, one of the issues was that when the modular classrooms were added at all the schools, that used up some space, but there's just you have a lot of staff, you have a lot of parents
yeah.
dropping off students, so.
I don't
Yeah.
disagree that there's not enough
Yeah.
parking in Harrington.
There's there's not enough land there to park.
No.
Yeah.
That's the problem, because
Well, especially when they move the playground back to behind the school from the side when they would put the modular in.
yeah.
It
So I
it
believe-
decreased already limited space, especially since the solar farm is right behind there.
Oh, yeah, and the
Yeah.
problem is that the land just drops on, there's no
Mm-hmm.
space to go.
And the next school facilities projects involves some work to bring the kitchens up to code compliance for a few things. The first thing, as you see in the photo, we've all seen for years butcher block surfaces. Those are not non-compliant. So basically, the food preparation surfaces need to be stainless steel for sanitary reasons. It also installs, our buildings are older. A lot of them have the ceiling material that's not washable. It might be that the thing is supposed to be acoustically reduce sound, so you need to have washable ceilings, you have to have, they're gonna be installing exhaust hoods that are code compliant, as well as, some sanitary items such as sneeze shields, pot sinks, hand washing sinks, gonna be basically bringing what they have up to code. And this project is going to involve, all of the Byam, Harrington, South Row, Parker, and Westlands.
So the sneeze shields will be for the hot lunch section where the kids come in and they,
Yes, that's my understanding.
that's
of it.
fantastic. I'm just saying.
Another project related to school.
It's a necessity.
This next project also involves the school kitchens, and this involves the Byam, Harrington, and South Row elementary schools, and this is going to upgrade the kitchens and food prep areas. There's going to be new equipment installed, some non-slip flooring, as well as new student serving lines, which is what you were asking about, Jim, and also some furnishing.
A
So
lot of this came from that Dora Whittier study, so that
Yeah.
it's now all being implemented.
Imagine that. We're implementing things on a scheduled, staggered basis on the Joe Whittier study.
That's
How
why you're
about-
seeing
yeah.
stuff cross schools and so forth, yeah.
And also, I think they said that this would give them the capacity going forward, or improve their situation as far as being able to serve, to change the methodology of what they serve in the elementary schools, possibly.
Right,
Mhm.
They're like, now they get frozen meals or something in the,
Oh, okay.
right, they prepare at
The
the high school, middle
pre-prepared,
school.
yeah.
they
Yeah,
can-
they've sent
they put
out,
the
so-
warming areas at
Right.
the elementary
so
schools.
they're, this would put them in a step to be able to perhaps make a different decision on that.
Yeah.
Mhm. Fresher,
Perhaps, yeah.
So
potentially.
from when we heard, when Superintendent Lang spoke and some other folks from school administration, as Kathy said, they want to transition to trying to cook more food on site and not buy pre-prepared meals and
Right.
some, so that's the reason for the kitchen upgrades. Next, going on, the last area is school technology, and there are some security upgrades planned at a cost of $440,000. These are going to involve both middle schools and the central administration building, and basically, some of the key points of the system, there'll be access, control, and door monitoring. There'll be panic and lockdown alarms that are installed, and they'll be tied directly to police dispatch, as well as a new building intrusion system. So they're looking to make some security
The
upgrades.
next step, the first step with the security was the entrances and the cameras,
Yeah.
everything. Now you're basically going into the schools for the areas.
Extending those, yeah.
Extending
Yeah.
that camera system into the schools and the two middle schools, and then they'll be back to the high school and then elementary.
That's great.
So it's that next step beyond just, the entry points.
And then, as we know from past years, really the next steps in this process are the capital plan will be brought before town meeting for consideration in April, and then assuming that's approved, then we would then work on issuing bonds to finance those improvements in June. And then finally, the last slide is one you've seen before. That's a summary of the entire capital plan.
I heard that the school budget, they're getting enough Chromebooks for all the students in their budget.
Yeah, I hear there is a plan to provide every student
Now,
with
is
the
that in their,
Chromebook.
so that's not in the capital budget, that's in their
No,
operating?
that's in their operating budget, yeah.
They're able to do that, okay.
Phase it in by grade.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's just, it's just now, it's like a police cruiser. It's
It's a
just
whole
part of the-
new world,
It's
yeah.
part of the regular, curriculum now. You send the kids home with the tablet.
All right. Thank you, John.
Okay, great.
Thank you. All right, reorganization, discussion, and vote. We punted this once in the fall. Seeing as we don't have two members here tonight, we can either proceed with it, or we can move it to our next meeting. It's at the board's pleasure.
should do it next meeting.
Next
We have
meeting?
everybody.
Sure, I'm fine with that.
Is there anybody not going to be available next week that we know of?
We're not meeting next week, that's
We're
the
not
next
meeting.
discussion. No, because we are,
You still wanted to come.
well, the reason why, David, is because there's just not enough time in between now and then to really meet with any departments or anything like that, to have anything substantial to put on to the agenda that night. Originally, when we were going to meet on the 31st, we were going to have the discussion we had tonight regarding the warrant articles and everything like that. But with the advent of the special town meeting, it kind of bumped everything up a week so that we could meet our recommendation requirements. And therefore, because we had tonight, there's not really much to talk about next week. So the first meeting we'll have will be the first week in February. The 7th, yeah.
All right.
So it punts until after the special town meeting, but. Okay, everybody okay with that? All right, so I have a motion to table it until the next meeting.
I make a motion that we table the reorganization until our next scheduled meeting.
Second? Discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Discussion of the liaison assignments for fiscal year 2020 budget review. I passed out a liaison list. It's based upon last year's information. I think, Pam, that I gave you one too. Just check to make sure your contact information is correct on the second page. I believe it is. I'm just gonna have to get Vicky's just to make sure. I for some reason, have her phone number. Obviously in our liaison list last year, we had Elian on a good portion of these. Since her passing, Vicky has joined the board, but I didn't put Vicky into those slots because I think we need to have a discussion about who wants to do what, and seeing as there's a new person in, there might be some movement here or there as to who goes where and how we address it. So we don't have to make these decisions tonight, although it might be good to at least take a look at it, and we can certainly, I can circulate this and people can say what they would like to be put onto. So that we, when we meet before town meeting, we could briefly say, just confirm where people are going and who they're going to be talking to, so that they can get the ball rolling on meetings to have people come in on the 7th. Although that's not going to work. That's too little time.
Yeah, so I was gonna say, why don't we, Vicky's new.
Yep.
So she should be paired up with someone else, right? We shouldn't send her off, I would think.
Yeah, well, yeah,
Right?
essentially.
Is that fair? Right?
That's been how we've worked it in the past. We usually double people up on their first go-around, and then if they want to go off on their own on the second round, they're certainly more than welcome to do so. But just to take that kind of,
So then, then we can just give it to her who she wants to,
yeah,
right? Like, I think.
we can always adjust who's going where.
Yeah.
So let's just run down the list right now then, I guess. Anita, you were at Board of Health. You gonna stay there?
Yeah, I like to stay with the Board of Health.
Okay, I'm gonna run down the list, so.
Sorry.
Capital planning, Kathy's already taken care of that, so we're all set with that. Cemetery, Anita, you want to stay with that too?
Sure.
Chelmsford Public Schools, I currently have Kathy, Amina, and David. You guys all set with that?
Yep.
Did Amina want to do that?
Amina said she was okay with staying on that.
Okay.
Community Preservation Fund, Kathy, you were there. Do you want to continue doing that?
Sure.
All right. Senior Center, Elian was on that one before. Does anyone want to do that, or do it in conjunction with somebody else?
I'll take it since I'm a senior.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay.
Is that a requirement?
I don't know if it's,
That's not a requirement,
Might
but you're,
not be.
you're more than welcome to do it.
they might just hold me there.
You could just talk to the director where you're there for your regular visit.
Not let you, yeah. All right, DPW waste sewer storm water is added to that this year. Eric, you and I did that last year. You want to do that again?
I'm happy to, yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. Finance Department, and that really covers the next four. It's meeting with John, Ted, and Frank, and Darlene for accounting, assessors, information technology, treasury, and collection. Elian did all of those, and she did it in one fell swoop last year. I don't know, someone wants to do that with Vicky, or someone want to do that by themselves. I don't know.
I mean, I can do it with Vicky.
Okay.
But can I, then maybe, if I do that, can I maybe?
To jump off something else,
Yeah,
potentially.
maybe jump off.
Yeah.
Want me to do the fire department?
I'll do the fire.
Oh, too bad.
Everyone wants to do the fire department.
No, I'll do anybody.
You don't get to ride the engines, guys. There's no sliding down the pole. At least that I'm aware of. I've never done it before.
You ask?
That's true. You didn't ask. All right, so we need to do that with Vicky. And then if we did switch around, we can certainly do that.
Because then I can do it all once.
Well, one fell swoop, yeah.
Library, there you go.
So you're going to pop off fire department.
Okay.
Amina said she wanted to stay on that.
Yeah.
Eric, you said you wanted to pop on that one?
Yeah,
Or Dave?
yes.
Either one?
I will, yep.
Okay. Kathy and Dave, you guys met with Becky last year for the library. You guys want to continue doing that?
Kathy doesn't need me for the library, I can tell you that right now. She's more than capable. Okay.
Okay.
The
I'm
library.
managing that. I'd
Kathy.
be glad to
I've got-
join
I've
you if
already-
you want me
no,
to.
I've already got my bag of books to deliver like I did.
All
last
right, well
year.
then, okay, I'll knock you off of that one, Dave.
Yeah, I'd be glad to go on something else.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's-
Let's see here, Neshoba Valley District, last year it was Eric, Dave, and Elian.
I'll send-
I don't mind staying or swapping,
I don't mind
if
staying
somebody
with
wants
it,
to.
too.
Just-
Who do you choose?
No, you guys are more than welcome to continue with that.
Okay.
Do we want to throw Vicky on there too? I don't want to give her too much. Well, you know what,
We'll ask her.
I'm gonna put Vicky there right now, currently, and if she's not available to do that, then she doesn't need to, because you guys are more than capable of doing that. We just usually put 3 per school system in the past, and that stems from the very extensive one a few years ago. PEG access, it was Alien and Amina, I think, I can't recall if,
I mean, it's tax season.
I think she said she wanted to jump off of that one, if I recall.
Which one, what are we on?
Peg?
PEG access cable. So we'll need someone for that one.
Is Peg in this building?
No, it's over at Parker.
Okay.
Tell you what, I'll jump on that one, and yeah, I'll just jump on that one. Police department, I mean, you want to stay there, I'll stay there too. Public facilities kind of goes hand in hand with DPW, although it really went hand in hand last time because Kathleen was unavailable. Town manager, obviously, we've taken care of that. And veteran services,
I like to stay on that.
you want to stay on that?
I like to see
Okay.
my annual check-in with Regina.
All right, does anyone else want to jump on to anything else with somebody else?
You know what, do you mind if I jump off of cemetery? Because then I can do all of the town in one day. And I'll only come here
Okay,
once.
then who would want to do cemetery?
Oh, I suppose that's right up my alley, too.
You said it to me.
Holy cow!
I'll gladly take it.
Strat used to say that too, so I mean,
I already own property up there, so
fair enough. Okay.
I could do one day off and come in and.
There you go, perfect. All right, so that takes care of the assignments. Pam, I have them here if you need me to. What I'll do is I'll input them and circulate it, and everybody can just confirm. And now that we have the assignments, you can reach out to the departments as soon as tomorrow and start setting up meetings and see when they're available to come in. We don't anticipate town meeting going more than one night, special town meeting. Oh, no. Well, I mean, stranger things have happened, but our plan is to meet that Thursday. As far as the warrant article schedule goes, there are a couple that have been kind of added since the draft I was looking at for this, so I will add those on. Most notably being the roof, windows, and door replacement project, and for the Neshoba, and the annual authorization. I'm sorry, the increase in funding for senior citizen property tax work-off program. So I'll add those two in. The other ones are kind of ones that aren't covered by just the general meeting with the departments. Although some of them are very simple, such as the form ice rink and the golf course budgets, that they can be dealt with in one night with the budget.
So our meetings would start
February 7th.
February 7th.
So that's the next discussion. It's the hearing and springtime meeting warrant article schedule. So Pull up my calendar here. We have springtime meeting starting April 29th. Monday, April 29th. The book has to be delivered by April 15th. The printer by April 11th. And it's finalized between the 8th and the 10th. So our real last date is going to be around April 4th at the absolute latest. That'd be the absolute last day we could have a vote. So that really leaves February and March. I know in the past we've tried to avoid February vacation just for people's travel schedules, although I think last year we actually did hold a meeting during that week.
Yeah.
I don't know, are people, when are people not available, I guess is my first question.
I'm not available that's straight, February 21st,
February 20th,
which is.
that's
the third.
vacation
I'm
week,
not
yeah,
aware that day.
I'm also not available the following week.
the 28th,
That's correct.
okay.
My husband says we might be going on away in February, but I don't know when. It's kind of a business-related thing for him, so.
Valentine's Day, the 14th, yeah.
That's
Oh,
my,
yeah,
that's my
that's a
birthday,
surprise.
so,
I am out the 13th to the 15th of March, so that's a Wednesday to a Friday.
13th, 15th, so March 14th you'd be out.
Yep.
I'm out for April vacation, but I think we're done by.
That we're done by, oh yeah, we're done by then. Okay, so that kind of knocks out, as we said in the past, at least the 21st. If there's one person missing for a couple nights, we'll just make sure that you're not scheduling your department that night.
Yep.
So Dave, you wouldn't schedule anybody with the 28th for yours, and Eric, the 14th of March for yours. Although if I'm here on a double, if someone's here on a double for them, obviously, you can still schedule that night depending on the availability of the department or the warrant article. So it looks like the 7th of February, the 14th of February. Happy Valentine's Day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The 28th of February. And then March 7th through the 28th, with the goal, I think, of really being the vote. Trying to think here. If we do the vote the 28th, if we can't do it the 21st of March, how much time is it going to give us, Pam? That's going to cut it close, isn't it?
To vote on the 28th?
Yeah,
No, that's fine.
that's fine. I'm looking at the schedule here. It says, oh, no, it should be good. 28. So let's aim for the 28th and hope that we land on the 21st for the vote. We might get everything done before the 28th.
You gotta remember snowstorms. May derail us today, so.
Yeah, I know. That killed us. That killed us in past years, but we're not prevented from going on a different night if it's not. Why is that marked on my calendar? If it's not a Thursday, if it's not, it is the night that we have available space. We can certainly do that. All right, so 3 nights in February. March, we're looking at 4 nights available currently. That should give us plenty of time. It's not a really extensive warrant, at least currently. There aren't a whole lot of, at least from what I can see, hot button issues, although I've been surprised in the past. Any other discussion on the schedule? All right. Any public comment? Any press questions? All right. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'd make a motion for adjournment.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.